I'm standing in a sterile office with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, wearing a soft pink bathrobe worn thin at the elbows because I don't own anything else clean enough to wear in public anymore. The lawyer across the desk won't stop staring at the paper in his hand. His voice cracks when he finally speaks. "Mrs. Henderson, I need you to sit down for this." I'm already sitting. I've been sitting for 10 minutes while he verified my identity 3 times, made 2 phone calls, asked his assistant to photocopy my driver's license twice. "The trust your sister established," he says slowly, "has a current value of $560,000. You're the sole beneficiary." I don't understand the words. They're English, but they don't make sense strung together like that. $560,000. My sister who worked in a school cafeteria. My sister who bought her clothes at Goodwill. My sister who died 4 years ago and left me nothing but memories and a voicemail I play when the silence gets too heavy. The room tilts sideways. I taste something metallic. The lawyer's assistant brings me water in a paper cup that I can't seem to hold steady enough to drink. "That's not possible," I whisper. "She had nothing." He slides documents across his desk. Bank statements, investment accounts, a life insurance policy I'd completely forgotten about. "She'd been preparing this for over a decade," he says gently. "The instructions were very specific. The funds were to be released to you only when you needed them most." His eyes move to my bathrobe, to my unwashed hair, to the eviction notice I'd shown him as identification when my driver's license wasn't enough. I'd say that time has come. But that's not where this story begins. Not really. Let me take you back 3 weeks, to the moment everything finally shattered. Chapter 1. The Shoebox. The shoebox was cardboard, the kind that held cheap sneakers from Payless, and it was tucked in the back corner of my closet behind winter coats I couldn't afford to dry clean anymore. I was pulling everything down because I had 3 weeks before eviction, and the homeless shelter required me to arrive with only what would fit in 2 bags. Everything else had to go. Salvation Army. Dumpster. Curb. 48 years of life reduced to donation piles on a duplex floor in Charlotte, North Carolina, where the autumn light turns golden in the afternoon and makes everything look more beautiful than it has any right to be. I wasn't planning to open the shoebox. I knew what was inside. Photos from before the accident that killed my son 6 years ago. Before I started giving his widow everything I had. Before I discovered she'd been using my money to fund her boyfriend's gambling addiction while cutting me off from my granddaughter. Before I ended up here, alone in a duplex with a shared driveway and thin walls on a quiet suburban street with modest homes and chain-link fences, where I could hear my neighbor's television through the wall every night and pretended it was company. But the tape on the box had yellowed and loosened, and the corner flap lifted as I moved it. And there he was. My son. 23 years old in the hospital, holding his newborn daughter for the first time. His face split wide with the kind of joy that doesn't exist anymore. Not in my world. The baby's eyes were closed, her tiny fist curled against his chest, and he looked at her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever had. I sat down right there on the closet floor, still holding a trash bag in one hand, and I broke. Not crying. Something deeper than crying. A sound came out of me that I didn't recognize, animal and raw, and I pressed my face into my knees and rocked until the sound stopped because my neighbors could hear everything, and I was so tired of being pitied. Do you know what it feels like to realize you've lost everything twice? Once when death takes someone you love, and again when you discover that your grief made you stupid? That's where I was. Sitting in a closet at 48 years old, about to lose my home, with credit cards maxed out and a bank account showing $17.32. I had given my daughter-in-law $40,000 a year for 6 years. $240,000 total. I did it because that's what mothers do. That's what my son would have wanted. I worked double shifts as a medical billing specialist, ate ramen for dinner, canceled my health insurance, stopped getting my hair cut, wore the same 5 outfits in rotation until they developed holes I tried to hide. I did it gladly. She was raising my granddaughter alone. She needed help. I was helping. Except she wasn't alone. She had a boyfriend. Had one for 4 years, apparently. And my money wasn't going to my granddaughter's college fund, or keeping their house, or buying groceries. It was going to his failed restaurant ventures, his gambling debts, his BMW lease, his designer clothes. I found out by accident, through a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear when I dropped by unannounced to bring banana pudding layered with vanilla wafers. My grandmother's recipe that my granddaughter used to love. She was on the phone in the kitchen, laughing. Yeah, she sent it again. 40 grand like clockwork. I swear she's the easiest mark in the world. What? Of course not, are you kidding? I told her we needed it for Emma's braces. The old bat believes anything. I stood in her doorway, holding a casserole dish while she called me a mark, while she laughed about it. When she saw me, she didn't apologize. She doubled down, told me the money was legally hers once I gave it, and there was nothing I could do about it. Told me I should be grateful she'd let me see Emma at all these past years. Told me to get out of her house and never come back. I haven't seen my granddaughter in 8 weeks. 9 years old. Looks just like her daddy. Doesn't return my calls because her mother won't let her. Probably believes whatever lies she's been told about why Grandma doesn't visit anymore. The eviction notice arrived 2 weeks later. I'd stopped paying my own rent consistently when I prioritized sending money to someone who was using it to fund her boyfriend's lifestyle. The credit card companies were calling daily. My car had been repossessed last month. I was 3 weeks from being on the street with nowhere to go and no one to call. My sister would have known what to do. She always knew what to do. Hard as nails, tough as leather, the kind of woman who could face down anyone and make them blink first. She raised me after our mother died, even though she was only 6 years older. She worked 3 jobs to keep us fed, made sure I graduated high school, pushed me to be better than our circumstances. We fought constantly. She was brutal in her honesty, merciless in her expectations. I resented her for years. Then I grew up enough to understand that everything she did, every harsh word and impossible standard, came from the most ferocious love I've ever known. She wanted me to survive. She wanted me to be strong. She wanted me to never end up like this, like I am now, broken and desperate and alone. She died 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and vicious and final. At her funeral, some lawyer mentioned paperwork, but I was drowning in grief and barely heard him. I signed what needed signing and moved on, assuming there was nothing left anyway. She'd lived paycheck to paycheck her whole life, a school cafeteria manager who raised 2 kids alone. What could she possibly have left behind? I put the photo back in the shoebox, taped it shut, added it to the donation pile. Some other family could have these memories. I couldn't carry them anymore. That's when I noticed my grandmother's old recipe book, the one with the banana pudding layered with vanilla wafers that my sister used to make for every family gathering. It was sitting on top of a stack of cookbooks I'd already boxed up. I pulled it out to add it to the keep pile, the one bag I was allowed to take with me to the shelter. As I lifted it, something slipped out from between the pages and drifted to the floor. A notarized document folded inside her grandmother's recipe book. I picked it up with hands that had started shaking for reasons I didn't understand yet. Unfolded it. Life insurance policy. My sister's name. My name listed as beneficiary. A phone number. A claim reference number. A law firm in downtown Charlotte. The paper was dated 8 years ago. 2 years before she got sick. 4 years before she died. She'd put this here deliberately, tucked into the one cookbook she knew I'd keep, the one that held the recipe she made with so much love that the pages were stained and soft from decades of use. I called the number from my kitchen floor, surrounded by boxes, wearing the same bathrobe I'd been living in for 3 days because what was the point of getting dressed when nobody saw me anymore? The receptionist transferred me immediately when I gave the claim number. The lawyer himself picked up, asked me to come in right away. Today, now. There were complications, he said. Things we needed to discuss in person. I went in the bathrobe. I didn't care anymore. I had 3 weeks before homelessness and $17 in my bank account and a granddaughter who thought I'd abandoned her. Dignity seemed like a luxury I could no longer afford. That's how I ended up in his office, listening to him tell me about $560,000, about my sister who had somehow saved and invested and planned for years without ever telling me, about a trust with specific instructions that the funds were to be released only when I needed them most. How did she know? I whispered. How did she know I'd need this? The lawyer looked at me with something like pity. She knew you, he said simply. She knew exactly who you are. Have you ever been saved by someone who isn't there anymore? Have you ever felt love reach across death itself to catch you right before you hit the ground? That's what this was. My sister, 4 years gone, still protecting me, still knowing me better than I knew myself, still loving me in the fierce, uncompromising way that had defined our entire relationship. I broke down in that office, sobbed so hard I couldn't breathe. Not because of the money, though God knows I needed it desperately. I broke down because she had known. Somehow she had known that I would give too much, that I would trust the wrong person, that I would end up alone and broken and desperate. And she had prepared for it. She had protected me even when she couldn't be here to do it in person. The lawyer gave me tissues and time and didn't rush me. When I could finally speak again, I asked the question that had been clawing at my throat. Why didn't she tell me? She left you a letter, he said. He pulled an envelope from a folder. My name in her handwriting, the bold capital letters she used that always looked slightly angry, even when she wasn't. She wanted you to read this when the time came. I think the time has come. I took the envelope, but couldn't open it. Not there, not in front of a stranger. I needed privacy for this. I needed to be alone with my sister one more time. If you've ever lost someone who defined your life, you know what I mean. If you've ever been loved so fiercely that it changed who you are, you understand. And if you've ever been saved by someone who isn't here anymore, you know that grief and gratitude can exist in the same breath, can break you and heal you simultaneously, can hurt so much that it feels like dying while also making you feel more alive than you have in years. I clutched that envelope to my chest and walked out of that office and back into the autumn afternoon where the light turns golden and makes everything beautiful. 3 weeks ago, I was going through old photos in a shoebox, preparing to lose everything. Now I was holding a letter from my dead sister and the key to a salvation I didn't deserve but needed more than air. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. Let me tell you about the fall, about how I got here, about every mistake that led to this moment, because none of this makes sense without understanding how far I'd fallen first. Chapter 2. The Unraveling. The phone call came on a Tuesday. That's the detail I remember most clearly, because Tuesdays were the days my son used to call me, back when he was alive, back before the accident that took him 6 years ago. He'd call every Tuesday evening at 7, reliable as sunrise, and we'd talk about nothing important for exactly 15 minutes before he had to put Emma to bed. Weather, work, what we'd had for dinner. The kind of mundane conversation you never realize is precious until it's gone. So when Jennifer, my daughter-in-law, called on a Tuesday evening at 7, my heart jumped before my brain caught up. For one stupid, impossible second, I thought it might be him. That the past 6 years had been the nightmare, and I was finally waking up. Then I saw her name on the screen, and reality crashed back down. Mom, I need to talk to you about something. She always called me Mom, even though we'd never been close. Even though I'd sensed something calculating beneath her grief at the funeral, something that made me uneasy even as I tried to push the feeling away. It's about Emma's education. I've been looking at private schools, and the tuition is more than I expected. This conversation had happened before. Different needs, same pattern, braces, summer camp, new clothes because she was growing so fast, car repairs, medical bills, always reasonable, always for Emma, always presented as temporary until she could get back on her feet. and I always said yes because my son had loved her, and Emma was all I had left of him, and what else was I supposed to do with my money anyway? "How much?" I asked, already knowing I'd find a way. "$40,000 for the year. I know it's a lot. But this school has the best college placement rate in the state, and I want Emma to have every opportunity." "I'll transfer it tomorrow," I interrupted, "because that's what grandmothers do. That's what mothers do. You sacrifice, you give, you make it work." "You're amazing," she said, and her voice carried that warm gratitude that made me feel needed, that made me feel like I was still mothering even though my son was gone. "Emma is so lucky to have you." I hung up feeling purposeful, useful, like the pain of losing my son could be transformed into something good for his daughter. I didn't know yet that Emma's school situation was fine, that she was attending a perfectly good public school 3 blocks from their house, that the $40,000 would go straight into her mother's boyfriend's failed restaurant venture, the third one he'd attempted in as many years, all of them funded by money that should have secured my granddaughter's future. This went on for 6 years. Different requests, escalating amounts, always for Emma. I gave and gave and gave until there was nothing left of the life I'd built. Gave until my retirement account was empty, my savings depleted, my credit cards maxed out trying to maintain my own basic expenses while sending her $40,000 every year. You want to know the worst part? I was proud of it, proud of my sacrifice. I told myself I was being selfless, that I was honoring my son's memory, that I was the kind of grandmother who put family first. I worked double shifts at the medical billing office, picked up weekend hours, canceled my gym membership and cable television and annual checkups, because who needed those things when there was a child to provide for? My sister would have seen through it immediately. She would have demanded receipts, asked hard questions, refused to enable what was clearly becoming a pattern. But my sister was gone, had been gone for 2 years by the time Jennifer's request started. Cancer took her fast and mean, pancreatic, the kind that gives you 3 months from diagnosis to grave. I was still raw from losing her when I lost my son, and the double grief made me stupid, made me desperate for connection, for purpose, for a way to feel like I was still somebody's mother. I ate ramen noodles for dinner most nights, the cheap kind that cost 29 cents a packet, not even the ones with the flavor packets that made them almost taste like food. I rotated the same 5 outfits for work until they developed holes I tried to hide under cardigans, stopped coloring my hair when the gray started showing through because a box of dye cost $12 I didn't have, canceled my health insurance because the monthly premium was $280, and that was almost a week's worth of groceries. My neighbors on this quiet suburban street with modest homes and chain-link fences probably thought I was depressed. Mrs. Patterson from 3 doors down started leaving casseroles on my doorstep with notes that said, "Made too much," even though we both knew she hadn't. I was too proud to accept them at first, but hunger strips away pride pretty quickly. I'd take the dishes inside, eat half for dinner, and save half for lunch the next day, and return the clean containers without ever acknowledging what was really happening. The duplex I was renting had thin walls and a shared driveway with my neighbor, a graduate student who played music too loud at 2 in the morning and never took out the trash on time. But it was affordable, barely, and it was mine, mostly, and it was better than nothing. I'd moved here 3 years ago when I could no longer afford my old place, the 2-bedroom apartment where my son used to visit with Emma, where we'd bake cookies together and watch animated movies, and I'd felt like a real grandmother instead of whatever I was becoming. This new place had a bedroom barely big enough for a bed, a kitchen where I couldn't open the refrigerator and the oven door at the same time, a bathroom with a toilet that ran constantly because the landlord wouldn't fix it, and a living room that served as my dining room and office and everything else. The walls were that particular shade of beige that exists only in rental properties, scuffed and dinged by previous tenants, marked with nail holes I wasn't allowed to fill. The carpet was brown, probably to hide stains, and it smelled faintly of cigarettes even though smoking wasn't permitted. I kept it clean. That was important to me, maintaining that much dignity. I couldn't afford new furniture or decorations, Couldn't afford to make it feel like home, but I could scrub and vacuum and keep everything organized. On my nightstand sat a worn Bible on the nightstand, open to Psalms, though I hadn't read it in weeks. Next to it, an old phone I kept charged for one reason only. A voicemail she saved on an old phone just to hear their voice again. My sister's voice from 5 years ago, calling to tell me she'd gotten the test results back and we needed to talk. I played it when the loneliness got too heavy, when the silence of the duplex felt like it would crush me. I'd lie in bed in my soft pink bathrobe worn thin at the elbows and listen to her say, "Hey, it's me. Listen, I got some news today and I need to talk to you about it. Call me back when you can. I love you, okay? I know I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you." She never said it enough, neither did I. We weren't that kind of family, the one that expressed feelings openly. We showed love through action, through sacrifice, through being there. She raised me after our mother died, worked 3 jobs to keep us fed, made sure I graduated high school even though it would have been easier to let me drop out and get a job at 16. She was hard on me, brutal sometimes in her honesty, merciless in her expectations. We fought constantly about everything, about my choices and my friends, and my tendency to trust people who didn't deserve it. "You're too soft," she'd tell me, always with this edge of frustration, like my compassion was a personal failing. "You let people walk all over you and call it kindness. That's not kindness. That's fear of confrontation dressed up as virtue." I resented her for years, thought she was cold, thought she didn't understand that not everyone could be as strong as her. It wasn't until I was older, until I'd made enough mistakes to understand what she'd been trying to teach me, that I realized everything she did came from love. The harshest criticism, the impossible standards, the refusal to let me make excuses for myself or others. All of it was her way of preparing me for a world she knew would try to break me. And I'd proven her right. Here I was at 48, about to be evicted, having given away nearly $250,000 to someone who viewed me as an easy mark. She would have been so disappointed in me. Or maybe not disappointed. Maybe she would have just shaken her head with that look she got, the one that said, "I told you so," without words, and then she would have helped me figure out what to do next. But she wasn't here. She'd been gone for 4 years. During the last good year she can remember, before my son's accident, before everything fell apart. She'd worked as a school cafeteria manager at the same elementary school for 23 years, feeding kids who often had nothing else to eat, sneaking extra portions to the ones she knew came from difficult homes. She died with almost nothing to her name, or so I thought. No house, no car worth anything. No jewelry except her wedding ring from a marriage that lasted 3 years before her husband walked out. At her funeral, a lawyer approached me. Young guy, nervous, handed me a business card and said something about paperwork that needed signing, documents that required my attention. I was too numb to process it. My sister was dead at 52. My son would die 18 months later. I was drowning in grief and barely functional. I signed whatever he put in front of me and assumed it was just closing out her accounts, handling her final bills, the administrative tedium that follows every death. I never followed up, never asked questions, never wondered if there might be more. Why would I? My sister lived paycheck to paycheck. She wore clothes from Goodwill and drove a car that broke down twice a month. When she got sick, she'd been terrified about the medical bills, about leaving debt behind. What could she possibly have left me except memories and guilt? The eviction notice arrived on a Monday, 3 weeks before I'd have to be out. The landlord had been patient, but even patience has limits. I was 4 months behind on rent, almost $6,000 in arrears, and he had a waiting list of people who could pay on time. The notice was polite but firm. I had until the end of the month to vacate. After that, the sheriff would be involved. I didn't cry when I read it. I'd stopped crying weeks ago. Crying requires energy, and I was running on fumes. Instead, I sat at my tiny kitchen table and made a list of what I owned that could be sold. My laptop, old but functional, maybe worth $200. My grandmother's china set, a wedding gift from 60 years ago, possibly worth something to a collector. My winter coat, barely worn. My books, my furniture such as it was. Even if I sold everything, it wouldn't cover what I owed. Wouldn't get me into a new place. Wouldn't rebuild what I'd destroyed by trying to be the grandmother my son would have wanted. I'd lost my car the month before, repossessed from the parking lot at work while I was inside processing medical claims. I came out at the end of my shift, and it was just gone, leaving an empty space that somehow seemed to mock me. Now I took the bus, adding an hour to my commute each way, standing because the seats were always full, listening to other people's phone conversations and pretending I couldn't hear them. The food bank had become a regular stop. I'd fought going at first, told myself I wasn't that desperate, that I could manage. But you can only eat ramen for so many meals before your body starts shutting down. The food bank gave me canned goods and pasta, and sometimes fresh vegetables that were about to expire. I'd thank the volunteers and avoid their eyes and carry my shame home in a canvas bag that said, reusable, in cheerful letters, as if sustainability mattered when you were trying to figure out where you'd sleep next month. Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor, knew something was wrong. She'd see me dragging that food bank bag up the driveway and pretend she didn't notice. She'd find excuses to give me things. I bought too many tomatoes and they'll go bad. My sister sent me this sweater, but it doesn't fit. I'm cleaning out my pantry and wondered if you could use some pasta. She never asked questions, never pushed for details, just quietly tried to help in ways that preserved my dignity, or what was left of it. I should have asked for help, should have told someone, anyone, what was happening. But who was there to tell? I had no family left except a daughter-in-law who'd called me a mark and a granddaughter I wasn't allowed to see. My friends from before had drifted away after my son died, unable to handle my grief, uncomfortable with my tragedy. The people at work knew me as the quiet woman who never took lunch breaks and picked up every overtime shift available. We weren't close. I'd made sure of that, keeping my personal life private because I was ashamed of how it looked. And somewhere across town, in a house I'd helped keep afloat with my money, my daughter-in-law was living a life funded by my sacrifice. Her boyfriend drove a BMW. They took vacations to Miami and Vegas. She posted photos on social media of dinners at expensive restaurants, bottles of wine that cost more than my weekly grocery budget, designer handbags that could have covered my rent for a month. I didn't know any of this yet. I wouldn't know until I showed up unannounced with banana pudding layered with vanilla wafers, trying one more time to see my granddaughter, trying one more time to be family to the only family I had left. I wouldn't know until I overheard that phone call, until I heard myself described as an easy mark, until I realized that for 6 years I'd been funding someone else's lifestyle while destroying my own. But on that Monday, holding the eviction notice in my hands, all I knew was that I'd failed. Failed my son by not protecting his daughter the way I'd intended. Failed my sister by becoming exactly the kind of person she'd tried to teach me not to be. Failed myself by believing that sacrifice was the same thing as love. Autumn was settling over Charlotte. The leaves were turning, gold and red and orange, beautiful in that way that feels like mockery when your life is falling apart. Through my kitchen window, I could see my neighbor's yard, neat and trim, his pumpkins arranged on the porch, his life normal and stable, and everything mine wasn't. I had 3 weeks. 3 weeks to pack up 48 years of life, to figure out where I'd go, to accept that I was about to become homeless at an age when I should have been planning retirement. 3 weeks to admit that everything I'd done, all my sacrifice and struggle and selfless giving, had been for nothing. The worn Bible on my nightstand stayed closed. I couldn't pray. Couldn't ask God for help when I'd brought this on myself. My sister's voicemail stayed unplayed. I couldn't bear to hear her voice saying, "I love you," when I'd failed to live up to everything she'd tried to teach me. I just sat there in my kitchen as the autumn light turned golden and thought about how I'd gotten here, about every choice that had led to this moment, about the daughter-in-law who'd stolen my future, and the granddaughter I'd never see again, and the son who'd died, never knowing how much it would cost to love his memory. If you've ever lost everything, you know this feeling. This moment of crystallization where you realize that the bottom has no floor, that you can always fall further, that there is no safety net strong enough to catch you when you've severed all your own support systems. You know that particular flavor of loneliness, the kind that tastes like failure and feels like drowning. I thought that was the end of my story. I thought I'd reached the final chapter, the one where the protagonist accepts defeat and fades into whatever comes after. I thought my sister's voice on that voicemail was all I had left of protection and love. I had no idea I was wrong. I had no idea she'd been protecting me all along, even after death, even when I couldn't see it. I had no idea that 3 weeks later I'd be sitting in a lawyer's office learning that the fall wasn't the end at all. But first, I had to hit bottom. Real bottom. The kind you don't come back from without help. The kind that strips away everything except the truth of who you are and what you're capable of surviving. Let me tell you about those 3 weeks. Let me tell you about what it takes to dismantle a life when you've already lost everything that mattered. Chapter 3. The Dissolving. The homeless shelter required an interview. I called from the bus stop outside my office, using my cell phone minutes I couldn't afford to replace, and spoke to an intake coordinator named Maria, who was kind in that professional way social workers learn. She asked questions I'd never imagined answering. Did I have any substance abuse issues? Mental health diagnoses? Criminal history? Physical disabilities that would require accommodation? No, I said to everything. I can't pay my rent anymore. Financial hardship, she said, probably typing. How long have you been experiencing homelessness? I'm not homeless yet. I have 3 weeks, but then I will be. She explained the process. I needed to bring 2 forms of identification, proof of my eviction notice, verification of my income, a list of my assets. The shelter had a 2-week maximum stay for singles without children, designed to be a bridge to more permanent housing. After that, if I hadn't found a place, I'd need to apply for transitional housing programs with months-long waiting lists. Do you have family who could help? She asked. The question cracked something inside my chest. No, I whispered. No family. After I hung up, I sat on that bus stop bench for 20 minutes, watching people hurry past in the autumn afternoon. Everyone looked purposeful. Everyone looked like they knew where they belonged. A young mother pushed a stroller while talking on her phone. A businessman checked his watch and frowned. A teenage couple held hands and laughed about something I couldn't hear. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that just feet away, a 48-year-old woman was planning her descent into homelessness. The duplex felt different after that call, less like a home I was losing and more like a waiting room before something terrible. I started sorting through my belongings, making piles. Keep, donate, sell, trash. The rules were simple. Keep only what would fit in 2 bags. Donate anything with potential value. Sell anything worth the effort. Trash the rest. My grandmother's china went first. I took photos and posted them online, asking $200 for the set. A woman messaged within an hour, offering $150. I accepted. She came that evening, a middle-aged collector who handled each piece with reverence, commenting on the pattern and the manufacturer and how rare it was to find a complete set. I wanted to tell her these plates had held Sunday dinners for 30 years, had been washed by 3 generations of women, had been the backdrop for birthdays and graduations and the kind of ordinary happiness that doesn't seem valuable until it's gone. Instead, I took her money and watched her load my grandmother's dishes into her car, each one wrapped carefully in newspaper, protected in ways I'd never protected anything that mattered. My laptop sold for $180, my winter coat for $40. My furniture, all of it particle board garbage from big box stores, wouldn't sell at all. I posted it as free on the neighborhood forum and watched it disappear within 2 days. Strangers came with trucks and hauled away the bed I'd slept in for 5 years, the couch where I'd sat every evening after work, the kitchen table where I'd eaten countless meals alone. Each item that left made the duplex echo more. Sound traveled differently in empty rooms. My footsteps were too loud. My breathing seemed amplified. I could hear my neighbor's television through the wall more clearly than before, the laugh tracks and dramatic music of shows I'd never watched. Mrs. Patterson appeared one afternoon as I was carrying donation boxes to the curb. She didn't comment on what was obvious, just offered to drive me to Goodwill so I wouldn't have to make multiple trips on the bus. We loaded her trunk in silence, and she drove me across town to the donation center, and she helped me unload boxes full of my life while making small talk about the weather and the leaves changing, and how autumn in Charlotte was always so pretty. "You know," she said as we drove back, "my church has a fund for people experiencing temporary hardship. No questions asked, no judgment. If you needed a little help with rent or deposits or whatever, I could put you in touch with the right people." I stared out the window at the quiet suburban streets with modest homes and chain-link fences, at the neighborhood I'd lived in for 3 years without ever really belonging. "It's too late for that," I said, "but thank you." "It's never too late," she said, but even she didn't sound convinced. I spent my evenings packing what remained. The keep pile was pathetic. Some clothes, my toiletries, a few photos, my grandmother's recipe book with the banana pudding recipe, my worn Bible, my old phone with my sister's voicemail. Everything I owned that still mattered fit into a duffel bag with room to spare. The second bag held practical items: a blanket, an extra pair of shoes, a raincoat, tissues, hand sanitizer, the accumulated necessities of a life reduced to survival basics. Faith became more difficult without becoming more urgent. I'd open the worn Bible on my nightstand to Psalms, where I'd left it marked, and try to find comfort in the words, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." But I did want. I wanted my home. I wanted my son. I wanted my granddaughter. I wanted my sister's practical wisdom and harsh love. I wanted to undo every choice that had led here. The words felt hollow, or maybe I felt hollow, and the Bible stayed mostly closed despite my attempts to find solace in it. At night, I'd lie in bed in my soft pink bathrobe, worn thin at the elbows, the one piece of clothing I wore constantly now, because what did appearances matter, and I'd listen to my sister's voicemail. Over and over, her voice saying, "I love you, okay? I know I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you." 5 years ago, she'd left that message, not knowing she had cancer yet, not knowing she had less than 3 years left. Just a random Tuesday call about some test results that turned out to be fine that time. A reprieve before the real diagnosis came. "I miss you," I'd whisper into the dark. "I need you. I don't know how to do this without you." The silence never answered back. Work became harder. I was tired all the time, a bone-deep exhaustion that coffee couldn't touch. Medical billing requires concentration, attention to detail, the ability to navigate insurance codes and claim forms without making mistakes that could cost the practice money. I was making mistakes, small ones at first, then bigger ones. My supervisor called me in for a conversation about my performance, her concern genuine but her message clear. I needed to improve or there would be consequences. I couldn't afford consequences. I needed every paycheck until the end, needed every dollar I could accumulate before becoming homeless. I forced myself to focus, to double-check everything, to stay late and verify my work. My coworkers noticed but didn't comment, probably assuming I was dealing with personal problems and too polite to pry. They were right on both counts. The food I had access to changed. Without a kitchen full of supplies, I relied more heavily on the food bank. Canned soup, pasta in boxes, peanut butter, white bread, the kind of nutrition that keeps you alive without making you feel good. I'd heat water in the microwave for instant coffee and call it breakfast. Eat peanut butter sandwiches at my desk for lunch. open a can of something for dinner, and eat it cold because I'd already packed my pots and pans. Mrs. Patterson's casseroles continued appearing on my doorstep, but less frequently now that she'd seen inside my empty duplex, now that she understood I was truly leaving. Each one came with a note. Thought you might enjoy this. Made your favorite. The recipe called for 2 chickens, and I only needed 1. Always giving me a way to accept help without acknowledging the charity of it. I should have been grateful. I was grateful. But gratitude is complicated when you're accepting kindness you can't return, when you know you're becoming someone's good deed, someone's story about helping a neighbor in need. I didn't want to be that person. I didn't want to need anyone's casseroles or kind lies about making too much. The neighborhood felt different as I prepared to leave it. I'd walk home from the bus stop in the autumn evenings when the light turns golden and makes everything beautiful, and I'd look at these modest homes and chain-link fences with something like longing. These weren't expensive houses, these weren't wealthy people, but they had stability. They had homes they'd return to tomorrow and next week and next year. They had the kind of security I'd taken for granted until it was stripped away. Do you know what it's like to grieve a place you never loved while you lived there? To feel nostalgic for a duplex with thin walls and a broken toilet and neighbors who played music too loud? That's where I was. Missing something I'd barely tolerated because at least it was mine, at least it was home, at least I belonged somewhere. My granddaughter's birthday passed. She turned 9. I had no way to send her a gift, no way to tell her I was thinking of her, no way to be part of her life anymore. I wondered if her mother told her anything about why Grandma had disappeared. Probably not the truth. Probably some story about how I'd moved away, or gotten sick, or simply stopped caring. Children believe what they're told, especially when the alternative is too complicated to explain. I'd imagined this birthday differently. Thought I'd take her to the zoo, or out for pizza, buy her books or art supplies or whatever 9-year-olds wanted. Thought I'd be the grandmother who showed up, who mattered, who stayed even after her father couldn't. Instead, I was the grandmother who'd given her mother $250,000 for private school tuition that went to her boyfriend's gambling debts. And now I couldn't even afford a birthday card from the dollar store. The eviction date approached like a deadline I couldn't extend. 2 weeks, 10 days, 1 week. Each morning I woke up in the duplex knowing there were fewer mornings left. I started sleeping on the floor after I sold my bed, using my blanket as padding, my duffel bag as a pillow. My body ached from the hard surface, but it felt appropriate somehow. Practice for the shelter cot that was coming. On my last Sunday in the duplex, I sat on the floor in my empty living room and tried to pray, tried to feel something other than numbness, something other than defeat. The worn Bible sat next to me, but I couldn't open it. What would I ask for? What would I say to a God who'd let me lose everything? My son, my sister, my home, my granddaughter, my future. I tried, I said out loud to the empty room, to God or my sister or whoever might be listening. I tried to be good. I tried to help. I tried to do what was right. The silence answered back, and somehow that felt right too. What was there to say? I had tried, and trying hadn't been enough. Good intentions don't pay rent. Sacrifice doesn't prevent eviction. Love doesn't protect you from the people who'd use it against you. Mrs. Patterson knocked on my door that afternoon. She brought me one final casserole, this one chicken and rice, still warm from her oven. She also brought something else, a business card for a woman at her church who coordinated the hardship fund. I know you said it was too late, Mrs. Patterson said, standing in my doorway, looking into my empty duplex with eyes that held too much pity. But I'm asking you to try anyway. What's the worst that could happen? You're already at the bottom. Maybe someone wants to help you climb back up. I took the card because refusing would have been cruel. Thank you for everything, I said, for the food, for not asking questions, for just being kind when you didn't have to be. That's what neighbors do, she said, and then she hugged me, quick and fierce, and left before either of us could cry. That night, I ate her casserole on the floor of my empty duplex, using a fork I hadn't packed yet, and I called the number on the business card. A woman answered, cheerful and warm, and I explained my situation in the flat, emotionless voice I'd perfected over the past weeks. Evicted, no family, starting at a shelter in 3 days, needed help with deposits if she found housing. "Can you come by the church tomorrow?" she asked. "We'd like to talk to you in person." I said yes, even though I knew it wouldn't matter. Even if they could help with a deposit, I couldn't afford ongoing rent. My income barely covered my bills before I'd started giving Jennifer $40,000 a year. Now I was in debt, my credit destroyed, my savings gone. A one-time deposit wouldn't solve anything. But Mrs. Patterson had asked me to try, and she'd been kind, and I owed her the effort even if the outcome was predetermined. I spent my last night in the duplex lying on the floor, listening to my neighbor's television through the thin walls, thinking about everything I'd lost and everyone who'd left. My mother when I was 17, my sister 4 years ago, my son 6 years ago, and now even the illusion of family with Jennifer and Emma stripped away when I finally understood what I'd really been to them. An easy mark, a source of funding. Someone whose love could be exploited without consequence. My sister's voicemail played one more time in the darkness. "I love you, okay? I know I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you." "I know," I whispered back. "I know you did." If you've ever spent your last night in a place that was home, even a bad home, even a place you couldn't wait to leave, you know this feeling. The strange grief of an ending, the fear of what comes next, the weight of knowing that tomorrow everything changes and you don't get to choose how. I didn't know yet about the recipe book, didn't know about the document tucked between the pages of banana pudding instructions, didn't know that my sister had been protecting me even in death, that salvation was waiting in the most unlikely place. All I knew was that my 3 weeks had become my last night. And in the morning, I'd pack my 2 bags and leave my keys on the counter and walk out into an autumn day where the leaves were falling and the light was golden, and I had nowhere to go except the shelter that would take me for exactly 2 weeks before I'd need to figure out something else. The bottom, I thought, had to be close now. Soon I'd hit it, and the falling would stop, and I'd know what came after. I didn't realize the bottom was actually behind me, that I'd already passed through it during those weeks of dissolution and despair. I didn't realize that the next morning would bring a discovery that changed everything. But that comes next. First, I had to make it through the night. First, I had to accept that this chapter of my life was ending, that the woman I'd been when I moved into this duplex 3 years ago was gone. That whoever I'd become through loss and sacrifice and betrayal was someone I barely recognized. I fell asleep on the floor of that empty duplex, clutching my phone with my sister's voicemail, wearing my soft pink bathrobe worn thin at the elbows, and I dreamed of nothing at all. Chapter 4. The Recipe Book. Morning came with that specific quality of autumn light that hurts when you haven't slept well. Gold and insistent through windows that no longer had curtains. I woke up on the floor with my body aching from the hard surface, my neck stiff, my mouth dry, and the immediate understanding that this was moving day. My last day in this duplex. My first day of homelessness, though it wouldn't technically start until tonight when I checked into the shelter. The church appointment was at 10. The shelter intake wasn't until 4. That gave me 6 hours to pack the final items, clean the duplex for the walkthrough, hand over my keys, and accept that this part of my life was over. I made instant coffee in the microwave, using the last of a jar I'd bought 3 months ago, back when I still had a kitchen. Drank it standing up because I no longer had anywhere to sit. The duplex echoed around me, every sound amplified by empty rooms. My footsteps, the drip of the faucet in the kitchen, the distant hum of traffic from the street outside. Even my breathing seemed too loud. The 2 bags sat by the door, already packed. Everything I owned that still mattered. The rest of my belongings were in boxes labeled for donation, sitting in the living room, waiting for Mrs. Patterson to drive them to Goodwill one final time. I'd argued against accepting more help, but she'd insisted, and I was too tired to fight. The kitchen was almost empty. Just a few items left on the counter: my instant coffee, a box of crackers, a jar of peanut butter nearly empty, my grandmother's recipe book. I'd meant to pack the recipe book yesterday, but had forgotten, distracted by the process of dismantling my life. Now I picked it up, feeling the weight of it, the worn leather cover soft from decades of handling, the pages stained and marked with handwritten notes in 3 different generations of handwriting. My grandmother's recipes, my mother's additions, my sister's annotations. A history of women feeding their families, written in fading ink and butter stains. The banana pudding recipe was on page 47, the page most worn, most stained, most obviously loved. My sister made it for every family gathering, the traditional Southern version with vanilla wafers and the meringue topping that took forever to get right. I'd planned to make it for Emma's 9th birthday, had imagined us baking together, passing down the tradition to another generation. That wouldn't happen now. Probably wouldn't ever happen. Jennifer had made sure of that. I opened the book to pack it, and something fell out. A document, tri-folded, thick paper that felt official. It landed on the counter face down, and I could see the notary stamp on the back, raised and embossed. I picked it up with hands that had started trembling for reasons I didn't understand yet, unfolded it, and read words that didn't make sense at first because my brain couldn't process them fast enough. Life insurance policy, beneficiary designation form, my sister's name as the insured, my name as the beneficiary, policy number, claim number, contact information for a law firm downtown, Morrison, Wells, and Patterson, attorneys at law. The document was dated 8 years ago. 2 years before my sister got sick. 4 years before she died. She'd put this here deliberately, tucked inside the recipe book between the banana pudding instructions and the lemon meringue pie that came after it. She'd hidden it in the one cookbook she knew I'd keep, the one that held her signature recipe, the one that connected us across years and loss. My vision blurred. The document shook in my hands. Life insurance. My sister had life insurance. She'd never mentioned it, never told me it existed, never said anything about death benefits or policies or beneficiaries. I'd thought she had nothing. I'd thought she died broke, leaving only debts and the administrative tedium of closing out a life lived paycheck to paycheck. The policy amount wasn't listed on this form, just the policy number and instructions for filing a claim. I grabbed my phone from my pocket and called the number printed at the bottom before I could think about it, before I could talk myself out of it, before I could decide this was a mistake or a misunderstanding or cruel hope disguised as salvation. Morrison, Wells, and Patterson, a receptionist answered, crisp and professional. How may I direct your call? I found a document, I said, my voice unsteady. A beneficiary form. For a life insurance policy. The insured was. She died 4 years ago. I didn't know. I never filed a claim. I didn't know there was anything to claim. A pause. What's the policy number? I read it to her, stumbling over the digits, having to start over twice because my hands were shaking too badly to see clearly. 1 moment, please. Hold music. 40 seconds. That felt like hours. My heart was doing something irregular in my chest, too fast and too hard, making it difficult to breathe. This couldn't be real. People didn't hide life insurance policies in recipe books. People didn't save you from beyond the grave with documents tucked into banana pudding instructions. Ma'am, I'm transferring you to Mr. Morrison directly. He's been waiting for your call. Waiting for... Click. More ringing. Then a man's voice, older, gentle, concerned. Ms. Henderson? Margaret Henderson? Yes, I whispered. Ms. Henderson, my name is Thomas Morrison. I'm the attorney who handled your sister's estate. I've been trying to reach you for 4 years. The kitchen tilted. I gripped the counter to steady myself. I never got any messages. I sent letters to the address we had on file, 3 of them over the first year, then annually after that. They were never returned, so I assumed you'd received them and chosen not to respond. I should have tried harder. I should have... He stopped, cleared his throat. Can you come to my office today? Right now, if possible. There are things we need to discuss, urgent things. Things your sister wanted you to know. I have a church appointment at 10, I said stupidly, as if that mattered. As if anything mattered except understanding what this document meant. And I'm supposed to check into a homeless shelter at 4 because I'm being evicted today and I don't have anywhere else to go. Silence on the other end. Then, very quietly, Ms. Henderson, I think you should come here first. The shelter can wait. What I need to tell you can't. I went in my bathrobe, didn't change, didn't care. Just grabbed my phone and my keys and the document and walked out, leaving my 2 packed bags by the door, leaving the donation boxes for Mrs. Patterson, leaving the empty duplex behind without ceremony or closure. If this was nothing, if this was some administrative loose end that wouldn't change anything, I'd come back and finish moving out. If this was something else, something impossible and life-altering, then none of the rest mattered anyway. The law office was downtown, a modest building on Tryon Street, the kind of place that handles wills and real estate and small business contracts. Not fancy, not intimidating, just competent and established, the brass nameplate by the door polished but not new. I took the bus, using fare I couldn't afford, standing, because the seats were full, clutching the document to my chest like a talisman. The receptionist recognized me immediately when I walked in. Ms. Henderson, she said, rising from her desk. Mr. Morrison said to send you straight back. His office is the last door on the right. The hallway was lined with diplomas and photos of Charlotte from decades past. Black and white images of streets I recognized but buildings I'd never seen. The city before I was born, before my sister was born, before any of this history that led to this moment. Thomas Morrison's office door was open. He stood when I entered, a man in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes, and the look of someone who'd seen enough tragedy to recognize it immediately. Ms. Henderson, he said. Please, sit down. I sat in one of the leather chairs across from his desk. The office smelled like old books and coffee. Behind him, windows overlooked downtown Charlotte, the autumn sun making the glass towers shine gold. I need you to understand something first, he said, settling back into his chair, choosing his words carefully. Your sister came to me 8 years ago. She wanted to set up a life insurance policy, wanted to make sure all her paperwork was in order, wanted to protect you if anything happened to her. She was very specific about her instructions. She never told me, I whispered. She didn't want you to know. She said you'd worry, or you'd tell her it wasn't necessary, or you'd try to talk her out of the expense. She knew you, Ms. Henderson. She knew exactly who you were and what you'd do and how you'd respond. Everything she did was designed around that understanding. He pulled out a folder, thick with documents, and opened it on his desk. The life insurance policy through her employer had a death benefit of $200,000. But that's not all. Your sister was also saving money, had been for years. Small amounts at first, then larger ones as she got promotions at work. She invested conservatively, mostly in index funds and bonds. She was building something for you, building it slowly and carefully over more than a decade. My throat closed up. How much? The current total, including the insurance benefit and all investment accounts, is $560,000. You're the sole beneficiary of everything. But there are conditions attached to the trust she established, conditions about when and how the funds could be released. $560,000. The number was so large it lost meaning. That was more money than I'd made in my entire life. That was generational wealth. That was salvation. That was impossible. She wanted the funds released only when you needed them most, Mr. Morrison continued. She established specific criteria: evidence of significant financial hardship, loss of housing or risk of homelessness, medical emergency, or similar crisis. She didn't want you having access to this money during stable times because she knew you'd give it away. She knew you'd find someone to help. Some cause to support, some person you thought needed it more than you. She said, and I'm quoting her exact words here, "My sister's too generous for her own good. Don't let her squander this on people who don't deserve it." I started crying. Not gentle tears. Full-body sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken, that had been building for weeks or months or years. The lawyer passed me a box of tissues and waited, his expression patient and kind, and I cried for everything I'd lost and everything I'd just found, and the sister who'd known me so well that she'd protected me even after death. "She left you something else," he said when I'd calmed enough to hear him. He pulled an envelope from the folder, my name written across it in my sister's bold handwriting. "She wrote this 7 years ago, right after establishing the trust. She wanted you to have it when the funds were released. She said you'd need to hear her voice one more time, that you'd need to know why." I took the envelope with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, my name on the front, the seal unbroken. Inside, pages in my sister's handwriting, the same aggressive capitals she used for everything, the same impatient scrawl that had marked up my homework and signed my report cards and written notes on my apartment door when I wasn't home. "Do you need privacy to read it?" Mr. Morrison asked gently. I nodded. "Can I take it with me? I can't read it here, not yet. I need to be somewhere else for this." "Of course, take all the time you need. But Ms. Henderson, there are practical matters we need to address. You said you're being evicted today. You said you have nowhere to go. That changes now. The funds can be released immediately now that we've made contact. We'll need to file some paperwork, set up accounts, verify your identity, but we can expedite everything. You won't be sleeping in a shelter tonight. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" I understood. I understood that an hour ago I was homeless, and now I wasn't. I understood that my sister had saved me from beyond the grave. I understood that the recipe book I'd almost left behind, the document I'd almost missed, the policy she'd hidden in the pages about banana pudding, all of it had been deliberate. All of it had been love. "Can you help me find somewhere to go?" I asked, my voice small. "Just for tonight, until I can figure out what comes next. I don't know how to do any of this. I don't know how to have money again. I'll call a colleague who handles property management. We'll get you into a furnished apartment, something temporary but comfortable. Today. Within a few hours. And Ms. Henderson?" He leaned forward. "Your sister made one other request in her instructions. She wanted me to tell you that you're not allowed to feel guilty about this. She wanted me to make sure you understood that this money is yours, that you earned it by being exactly who you are, and that using it doesn't make you selfish or weak. She was very insistent about that part." The protector memento was already in my pocket. The old phone with my sister's voicemail, the one I'd saved for years, the one that said, "I love you, okay? I know I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you." Now I had her letter too, her final words, her explanation for this impossible gift. I clutched both of them and nodded because I couldn't speak anymore. Mr. Morrison made phone calls while I sat in his office trying to process what had just happened. Within 30 minutes, he'd found me a furnished one-bedroom apartment in a managed building near South Park, available immediately, first month and deposit covered by a check he'd write from the trust. Within an hour, he'd arranged for a car service to take me there, to stop by my duplex first, so I could collect my bags and leave my keys and not have to explain any of this to my former landlord. "Go read your sister's letter," he said as I stood to leave. "Then come back tomorrow, and we'll start handling the paperwork for accessing the full trust. For now, you have a roof over your head and the immediate crisis is over. The rest we can figure out together." I walked out of that office into the autumn afternoon where the light was still golden and beautiful, carrying an envelope that held my sister's voice and a phone that held her "I love you," and the understanding that I'd been protected all along, even when I thought I was alone, even when I thought I'd lost everything. The car service picked me up. The driver didn't comment on my bathrobe or my obvious emotional state. He just drove me back to the duplex where Mrs. Patterson was loading the last donation boxes into her car. When she saw me getting out of a town car instead of the bus, confusion crossed her face. "Change of plans," I said. "I'm not going to the shelter. Something happened. Something good. I'll explain later, but I need to get my bags and go." She helped me carry them to the car, asking no questions, just helping like she'd always helped. I hugged her hard and promised I'd call her. Promised I'd explain everything when I could speak without crying. Promised I wouldn't forget her kindness even though my circumstances had changed. The furnished apartment was small but clean, with actual furniture and a kitchen with appliances and a bedroom with a real bed. Nothing fancy, nothing extravagant, but it was safe and warm and mine, at least for now, at least until I figured out what came next. I dropped my bags by the door and went straight to the bedroom and sat on the bed, still wearing my soft pink bathrobe worn thin at the elbows, and I opened my sister's letter with hands that had finally stopped shaking. Chapter 5. The letter. I couldn't read it in the apartment. The space was too new, too unfamiliar, too devoid of meaning. I needed to be somewhere that mattered, somewhere that connected me to her, somewhere that felt right for receiving her final words. So I took the letter and my old phone and left, walking until I found what I was looking for. The cemetery was 15 minutes away, a sprawling place with old oak trees and stones that dated back to the 1800s, mixed with fresh graves from this year. My sister's plot was in the newer section, where the grass was still patchy and the monuments were modest. Just her name, her dates, and the line she'd requested. She did her best. 4 years since I'd watched them lower her casket into the ground. 4 years since I'd stood here surrounded by people from her work, from our old neighborhood, from pieces of her life I'd barely known about. She'd touched so many lives in ways I never understood until after she was gone. The kids she fed at school, the teachers she supported, the community she served quietly and without fanfare. I sat on the ground beside her stone, not caring about the damp grass or the dirt on my bathrobe. Pulled out my phone first, played her voicemail one more time. "I love you, okay? I know I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you." Let those words wash over me, the sound of her voice still so present even after 4 years of silence. Then I opened her letter. 5 pages, front and back, her aggressive handwriting filling every line. No wasted space, no room for sentiment that wasn't backed by truth. That was my sister, efficient even in her final message. Maggie. If you're reading this, something bad happened to you. I'm dead, obviously, since that's when Morrison was supposed to give you this letter. But you're also in trouble, bad enough that you needed to file the claim, bad enough that you finally found that policy I hid in the recipe book. Took you long enough. I know you're probably crying right now. Stop it, at least until you finish reading. You can cry after. I don't care, but pay attention first because this is important. I've known since you were 17 that you'd end up in some situation like this. Do you remember when Mom died and you tried to give all her jewelry to her sisters because you thought they deserved it more than you? I had to physically stop you. You were so worried about their feelings, about not seeming greedy, about making sure everyone else was taken care of first. That's when I knew I'd have to protect you from yourself for the rest of your life. You're too generous, Maggie. Not kind, generous. There's a difference. Kind people help when they can. Generous people help even when they can't, even when it destroys them, even when the person they're helping doesn't deserve it. You'd give your last dollar to someone who'd already stolen your first 99. I tried to teach you better. I really did. I was hard on you, I know. Too hard, probably. You resented me for it. I saw it in your face every time I questioned your choices or criticized your friends or pushed you to stand up for yourself. You thought I was mean. Maybe I was. But I was trying to make you strong enough to survive in a world that eats people like you alive. I'm guessing someone took advantage of you. I'm guessing you gave them money you couldn't afford to give. I'm guessing you put their needs ahead of your own until you had nothing left. I'm guessing you're feeling stupid and ashamed and like you should have known better. Stop that too. You're not stupid. You're just you, and being you in a world full of users and takers is dangerous. So here's what I did. I saved money for 12 years, little bits at first, then more as I could manage it. I put it in accounts you didn't know about. I invested it carefully. I bought a life insurance policy through work. I set up a trust with specific instructions. You only get this when you need it most, when you've hit bottom, when you're desperate enough that you can't talk yourself out of taking it. Because that's what you'd do if I gave it to you any other time. You'd find someone who needed it more. You'd help some cause or person or situation that pulled at your heartstrings. You'd squander my 12 years of sacrifice on whatever sob story crossed your path, and you'd end up right back where you started. Well, not this time. This money is yours. $560,000, give or take, depending on market fluctuation. That's enough to rebuild. That's enough to be secure. That's enough to finally put yourself first. But Maggie, you have to promise me something. You have to promise you won't give this away. Not to some boyfriend who needs a loan. Not to some family member who's in trouble. Not to some charity that deserves support. Not to anyone except yourself. This is your safety net, your fresh start, your protection against the next person who tries to use you. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking you don't deserve this. You're thinking I worked too hard for this money, and you should honor that by helping others with it. You're thinking about all the people worse off than you who could use this more. Stop thinking like that. You deserve this because you'd think that way, because you're the kind of person who'd give it all away and call it virtue, because you need someone to force you to be selfish just this once, and I'm that someone, even from beyond the grave. Use this money to take care of yourself. Buy a house, a real one that nobody can take from you. Get out of debt. Build a cushion. Live without constantly calculating whether you can afford groceries. And yes, eventually, when you're stable and secure and your own needs are met, then you can help others, but not before. Not this time. I made Morrison promise to only release this when you were desperate. I made him promise to make sure you understood this money comes with strings attached. You have to value yourself enough to use it. You have to believe you're worth protecting. You have to accept that sometimes the most generous thing you can do is take care of yourself so you don't end up needing others to rescue you. I won't be there to protect you anymore. I won't be there to tell you when someone's using you or to push you to be stronger or to forcibly stop you from giving away what's yours. So I did the next best thing. I protected you in advance. I saved and planned and built this safety net because I knew someday you'd need it. You probably feel guilty reading this. You probably think I should have used this money on myself, on my own life, on enjoying the time I had left. But here's what you need to understand. This was for me. Knowing you'd be okay after I was gone. Knowing I'd protected you one last time. Knowing you couldn't fall so far that you'd end up destroyed. That was worth more to me than any vacation or car or comfortable retirement. Taking care of you was what I did, Maggie. It was my job, my purpose, the thing that made sense of all the hard years. I raised you. I protected you. I tried to make you strong. And when I knew I couldn't do that anymore, I made sure you'd have this instead. So don't you dare feel guilty about using it. Don't you dare think you don't deserve it. Don't you dare give it away to prove you're still the generous, self-sacrificing person you've always been. Be selfish for once. Be protective of yourself for once. Value yourself the way I valued you for once. I know you keep my voicemail on that old phone. I know you play it when you're lonely. That was from 5 years before I died, before I knew I was sick. Just a random day when I wanted to tell you I loved you. I'm telling you again now. I love you. I loved you when I was strict. I loved you when I pushed. I loved you when you resented me for it. I loved you enough to spend 12 years building this safety net instead of building my own comfortable life. And I love you now, even though I'm gone, even though I can't be there to tell you to stop crying and start planning, even though I can't sit across from you at the kitchen table and make you promise to be smarter this time. You're going to be okay now. You're going to rebuild. You're going to have the kind of security I never had, the kind I spent my whole life working to give you. And someday, when you're stable and healed and whole again, you're going to help someone else. That's who you are. You can't stop being generous any more than you can stop breathing. But help them after you've helped yourself. Help them from a place of strength, not from desperation. Help them in ways that don't destroy you. And for God's sake, help people who actually deserve it this time. I have to go now. This letter is getting too long, and my hand is cramping. Morrison is waiting to notarize this and file it with the trust documents. But before I finish, I need you to know something. I was hard on you because I loved you. I pushed you because I believed in you. I saved this money because I knew you'd need it. Everything I did, every harsh word and impossible expectation and moment of brutal honesty came from the most ferocious love I knew how to express. I'm sorry I couldn't be softer. I'm sorry I couldn't be the kind of sister who gave hugs and spoke in gentle terms and made you feel comfortable. That wasn't who I was. But I hope you understand now that everything I was for you. Be strong, Maggie. Be smart. Be selfish for once in your life, and be okay. That's all I ever wanted. Just for you to be okay. I love you more than you know. Your sister. P.S. Make the banana pudding sometimes. Use my recipe. Remember me when you taste it. And don't you dare give the leftovers to some neighbor you barely know. Eat the whole damn thing yourself. I pressed the letter to my chest and sobbed, sitting in the dirt beside her grave, surrounded by autumn trees that were shedding their leaves in gold and red. The afternoon sun was warm on my face. Somewhere a bird was singing. Normal life continuing around me while I fell apart and rebuilt simultaneously. She'd known. She'd known exactly who I was and what I'd do and how I'd end up. She'd spent 12 years preparing for this moment, saving money she could have used to make her own life easier, protecting me even when I didn't know I needed protection. And she'd done it not despite her harsh love, but because of it. Because she loved me enough to save me from myself. I pulled out my phone, played her voicemail again. I love you, okay? I know I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you. And now I had her letter saying the same thing in 100 different ways, explaining everything I'd never understood about our relationship, about her expectations and her criticism and her impossible standards. She'd been preparing me, training me, trying to make me strong enough that I wouldn't need this money, that I wouldn't end up desperate enough to claim it. And when that failed, when I proved to be exactly who she'd always known I was, she'd made sure I'd have this safety net anyway. I'm sorry I failed, I whispered to her stone. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough. I'm sorry I let someone use me just like you always warned me about. I'm sorry I ended up needing this. But even as I said it, I knew she wouldn't be disappointed. She'd planned for this. She'd expected this, She'd saved for 12 years knowing this day would probably come. She wasn't disappointed. She was prepared. I sat there until the sun started to sink, until the afternoon turned to evening, until the autumn light shifted from gold to amber to rose. Read her letter 3 more times. Played her voicemail a dozen more. Let myself cry and grieve and feel grateful and angry and devastated and saved all at once. She was right about everything. Right that I'd give too much to someone who'd use me. Right that I'd feel guilty about accepting her help. Right that I'd want to give this money away to prove I wasn't selfish. Right that I needed someone to force me to value myself even after she was gone. My sister. My protector. My harsh critic and my fiercest advocate. Gone for 4 years but still saving me. Still loving me. Still protecting me from myself. I'll be smart this time, I promised her stone. I'll be selfish like you wanted. I'll take care of myself first. I'll make you proud. And then, because she'd have wanted me to stop wallowing and start planning, I stood up. Brushed the dirt off my bathrobe. Put her letter carefully back in its envelope. And walked out of that cemetery, carrying her love and her protection and her final gift. I had $560,000. I had a furnished apartment for the next month. I had a lawyer who'd help me navigate the paperwork. I had my sister's letter telling me exactly what to do with all of it. And I had a daughter-in-law who was about to discover that the woman she'd called an easy mark had been protected by someone who planned better than either of us could have imagined. But first, I needed to go back to that apartment and sleep in a real bed for the first time in weeks. I needed to eat something besides ramen and canned soup. I needed to process what had happened today, this impossible reversal from homelessness to salvation in the span of a few hours. Tomorrow, I'd start handling the practical matters. Tomorrow, I'd begin figuring out what came next. But tonight, I'd let myself feel saved. Let myself accept that sometimes love protects you even after death. Let myself believe that I deserved this, not because I'd earned it, but because my sister had decided I was worth saving. And who was I to argue with her judgment after she'd been right about everything else? If you've ever been rescued by someone who isn't there anymore, you understand this feeling. This complicated mixture of grief and gratitude, of loss and salvation, of missing someone desperately, while also feeling their presence more strongly than when they were alive. My sister had been dead for 4 years, but she'd just saved my life. That kind of love doesn't end with death. It just changes form. I walked back to my new apartment as the sun set over Charlotte, as the autumn evening turned cool, as the leaves fell around me like blessings. And I thought about banana pudding and harsh love, and 12 years of secret saving and sisters who protect you even from the grave. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tomorrow would bring conversations with Jennifer who'd want to know where my money came from. Tomorrow would bring decisions about what to do with this impossible gift. But tonight, I was just grateful to be alive, to be safe, to be loved enough that someone had planned for this moment years before it arrived. Tonight, I'd remember that being too generous only becomes a problem when nobody's there to protect you from yourself. And tonight, I'd thank my sister for protecting me one last time, for loving me enough to save me even after she was gone. The apartment was warm when I got back. I locked the door behind me, set my sister's letter on the nightstand where I could see it, and finally, took off the soft pink bathrobe worn thin at the elbows that I'd been wearing for days. Put on clean clothes from my bag, made actual food in the actual kitchen, sat at the small dining table and ate slowly, tasting every bite, crying intermittently but no longer from despair. These were different tears. Grateful tears, healing tears, the kind that come when you realize you're going to be okay after all, that the fall is over, that someone caught you right before you hit the ground. My phone rang. Mr. Morrison. Just checking that you made it to the apartment okay, that everything's acceptable. It's perfect, I said. Thank you. For everything. For waiting 4 years. For not giving up on finding me. Your sister was very clear about the importance of this trust. She made me promise I'd keep trying until we made contact. I'm glad we finally did. Get some rest tonight. We'll start the paperwork process tomorrow, but there's no rush. The immediate crisis is over. Everything else can wait. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet apartment and let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. From eviction to salvation in less than 12 hours. From my last day in the duplex to my first night in a place where I could breathe without fear. From believing I had nothing to discovering I had more than enough. My sister had done this. My sister who worked in a school cafeteria, who lived paycheck to paycheck, who wore thrift store clothes and drove a car that broke down constantly. She'd saved $560,000 over 12 years. She'd hidden the policy in a recipe book. She'd left me a letter explaining everything I needed to hear. She'd protected me with a love so fierce it survived death. I fell asleep in a real bed for the first time in weeks, holding my phone with her voicemail, her letter on the nightstand beside me, and the understanding that some bonds are too strong to be broken by something as insignificant as dying. She was gone. But she was also still here, still protecting me, still loving me the only way she'd known how. Tomorrow would bring the reckoning. Tomorrow, Jennifer would learn that the easy mark had been saved by someone who'd planned better than either of us. Tomorrow, I'd start figuring out how to rebuild a life from this foundation my sister had built in secret. But tonight, I was just grateful. Grateful to be loved. Grateful to be saved. Grateful to have had a sister who knew me well enough to protect me even from myself, even from beyond the grave, even when I didn't deserve it but needed it desperately. Chapter 6. The Reckoning. News travels fast in Charlotte, especially news about money. I'd been back in my furnished apartment for less than 48 hours when my phone started ringing with numbers I'd blocked months ago. Jennifer, her mother, her sister, even her boyfriend, the one who'd spent my money on BMWs and gambling debts. They all wanted to talk suddenly. All had urgent matters to discuss. All deeply concerned about my well-being after hearing I'd come into some money. I let every call go to voicemail, listened to the messages once, then deleted them. The pattern was identical across all of them. Fake concern, transparent flattery, vague references to misunderstandings and family, all building toward the obvious ask. They wanted in. They wanted their share. They wanted me to go back to being what I'd been before, the easy mark, the generous fool, the woman who'd give away everything to people who viewed her love as exploitable. My sister's letter was still on my nightstand. I reread it every morning, especially the parts about not giving this money away, about being selfish for once, about helping myself before helping anyone else. She'd known this would happen. She'd known they'd come circling back as soon as they learned I wasn't destitute anymore. Mr. Morrison had warned me, too. "The vultures will appear," he'd said during our second meeting, when we'd started the paperwork to transfer the trust funds into accounts under my name. Family members who disappeared when you needed help will suddenly remember they're related to you. People who took advantage will want second chances. You need to prepare yourself to say no, repeatedly, firmly. "I can do that," I'd said, more confidently than I felt. "Your sister thought you'd struggle with it. She left me specific instructions about helping you set boundaries if needed. She wanted me to remind you that protecting yourself isn't cruel. It's necessary." The furnished apartment was comfortable but temporary. I'd started looking at real estate, scrolling through listings for small houses in decent neighborhoods, places I could actually afford now, places that would be mine with no landlord, no eviction notices, no fear of displacement. The idea still felt surreal. Home ownership, security, a future that extended beyond next month's rent. But first, I had to deal with Jennifer. She'd left 6 voicemails in 2 days. The messages had evolved from sweet to insistent to threatening. The last one had been explicit. "I know you have money now. Emma deserves part of that. She's your granddaughter. You can't cut her out of your life just because you're angry at me. Call me back or I'll have my lawyer call you." her lawyer. As if she had any legal claim to money my sister had left specifically to me. As if her theft of $250,000 over 6 years gave her the right to demand more. The audacity was almost impressive. I called Mr. Morrison instead. Jennifer is threatening legal action. She thinks she's entitled to part of the trust. She has no claim, he said immediately. The trust was established long before you gave her any money. The funds were your sister's, not yours, until they transferred to you upon her death. Your daughter-in-law has zero legal standing, but if she files anyway, we'll handle it. Don't worry about that. What about Emma? I asked, my voice cracking on my granddaughter's name. I haven't seen her in months. I miss her so much, but I don't know how to have a relationship with her when her mother is using her as leverage. That's harder, Mr. Morrison admitted. Family court, custody arrangements, grandparent visitation rights, all of that is complicated and painful. But we can pursue it if you want. We can file for court-ordered visitation. We can document the pattern of Jennifer using Emma as a weapon to manipulate you. We can build a case. I thought about my sister's letter, about her insistence that I be selfish, that I protect myself first. Would she want me to fight for Emma? Or would she see it as another way for Jennifer to manipulate me, another path back to being used? Let me think about it, I said. Right now, I just want to get stable. I want to find a house. I want to rebuild. Emma will be 10 next year, then 11, then 12. Eventually, she'll be old enough to make her own choices about whether to have a relationship with me. Maybe that's the better path. Maybe I wait and let her come to me when she's ready. That's wise, Mr. Morrison said quietly, and painful, but wise. Jennifer appeared at my apartment building 3 days later. The doorman called up, asking if I wanted to see a visitor named Jennifer Henderson. I almost said yes out of habit, out of that old instinct to accommodate and appease. Then I looked at my sister's letter on the nightstand and said, "No. Tell her I'm not available. Tell her to stop coming here." She tried twice more that week. Both times I refused to see her. On the third attempt, the doorman told her she was being trespassed from the property and would be arrested if she returned. I felt guilty for about an hour. Then I reread the part of my sister's letter that said, "Don't you dare give it away to prove you're still the generous, self-sacrificing person you've always been." And the guilt faded. The real confrontation came 2 weeks later at the grocery store. I'd been carefully budgeting even with money in my account, old habits dying hard, buying store-brand items and calculating cost per ounce like I'd done for years. I was comparing pasta prices when I heard her voice behind me. "Maggie." I turned. Jennifer stood there with Emma, my granddaughter who'd grown taller in the 3 months since I'd last seen her, who looked uncomfortable and embarrassed by whatever was happening. Jennifer's expression was calculated concern, the kind she'd perfected over the years of manipulation. "I've been trying to reach you," Jennifer said, her voice loud enough to attract attention from other shoppers. "Emma misses you so much. We both do. I know we had a misunderstanding, but family should work through these things." A misunderstanding. That's what she was calling 6 years of theft. That's how she was framing using my money to fund her boyfriend's gambling while cutting me off from my granddaughter. "Hi, Emma," I said, ignoring Jennifer, focusing on the little girl who looked so much like my son. It hurt. "You've gotten taller." "Hi, Grandma," Emma said quietly. "Mom said you moved away." "I'm still in Charlotte," I said, "just in a different place." Jennifer stepped closer, her hand on Emma's shoulder like she was using my granddaughter as a shield. "We should talk. Maybe have dinner together. I know you've been going through a difficult time, but things are better now, right? I heard you inherited some money from your sister. That's wonderful. We should celebrate. As a family." There it was, the real agenda. She wanted to re-establish contact now that I had money again. Wanted to rebuild the relationship she'd destroyed so she could start taking from me again. And she was using Emma to do it. putting me in a position where saying no meant rejecting my granddaughter in front of witnesses. My sister would have eviscerated her on the spot. Would have made a scene in this grocery store that Jennifer would never forget. But I wasn't my sister. I was softer, more careful, more aware of Emma standing there looking confused and hurt. "Jennifer, we're not going to do this here," I said quietly. "You know what you did. You know why I stopped sending money. You called me an easy mark while I was standing in your doorway holding banana pudding I made for Emma's birthday. You stole from me for 6 years. You used my grief over my son to manipulate me into funding your boyfriend's lifestyle. And when I finally confronted you, you cut off my access to Emma entirely. So no, we're not going to have dinner. We're not going to celebrate. We're not family anymore. You made sure of that." "That's not fair," Jennifer said, her voice rising. "I was raising your granddaughter alone. I needed help. You gave it willingly. You can't call it theft just because you regret being generous." "I gave it for Emma, for her education, for her future. You used it for your boyfriend. That's not generosity I regret. That's fraud you committed." Other shoppers were watching now, pretending not to stare but clearly listening. Jennifer's face flushed red. "You can't prove that. You have no evidence. And even if you did, what are you going to do? Sue me? Take me to court? Drag your granddaughter through that process? Because that's what would happen. Emma would have to testify. She'd have to hear all about how you think her mother is a thief." She was right. I had no evidence except overheard phone calls and suspicions and the obvious math that didn't add up. And even if I could prove it, pursuing it meant hurting Emma in the process. "I'm not going to sue you," I said. "I'm going to do something much simpler. I'm going to stop talking to you. Stop accepting your calls. Stop giving you access to me. You want money? Get a job. Work for it like my sister did, like I did. But you won't get another dollar from me, ever. This is about the inheritance, isn't it?" Jennifer's voice was sharp now, calculated vulnerability abandoned. "You got money from your sister, and suddenly you're too good for your family. Suddenly, Emma doesn't matter anymore. Suddenly you're the victim when you're the one sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars while your granddaughter's mother struggles." "Emma matters," I said, looking at my granddaughter. "Emma has always mattered, but you don't, and I'm done pretending otherwise." I turned to Emma, who had tears running down her face, clearly overwhelmed by an argument she didn't fully understand. "I love you," I told her. "I've always loved you. When you're older, when you can make your own choices about who you have relationships with, I hope you'll call me. I'll be here. But until then, I can't have your mother in my life anymore. I'm sorry." Then I walked away, left my cart in the aisle, left the store entirely. Sat in my car in the parking lot and cried until my throat was raw, knowing I'd done the right thing but hating how much it hurt, how much it cost to protect myself. My phone rang 20 minutes later. Mr. Morrison. "I just got a call from a lawyer representing Jennifer Henderson. They're filing a civil suit claiming you owe her money for grandparental support you allegedly promised and failed to provide. It's baseless. Don't worry about it. But I wanted you to know." "She said she'd do it," I said. "I just didn't think she'd actually follow through." People do desperate things when they realize the money's gone. She probably spent everything you gave her and then some. Now she's in debt and seeing you as a way out. But Maggie, this isn't your problem to solve. She made her choices. You don't owe her recovery from those choices." He was right. My sister would have agreed. But knowing you're right doesn't make it hurt less. The lawsuit went nowhere. Jennifer's lawyer withdrew it after Mr. Morrison sent documentation of everything I'd given her over 6 years, along with a threat to countersue for fraud and misrepresentation. Turned out Jennifer didn't want discovery, didn't want her finances examined, didn't want to explain in court where all that money had gone. She stopped calling after that, stopped showing up, stopped trying to use Emma as leverage. Whether she'd found another source of funding or simply accepted that I was done, I didn't know. I blocked her number and tried to move forward. Emma's birthday came and went, 10 years old. I sent a card and a savings bond to Jennifer's address, knowing Jennifer would probably intercept it, but hoping maybe Emma would see it, would know I'd remembered. I didn't get a thank you call, didn't expect one. Mrs. Patterson, my old neighbor from the duplex, became my unlikely champion. She'd helped me move some boxes from the old place to the new apartment, had seen me transform from desperate to stable, had watched the whole situation unfold. One afternoon over coffee, she asked what had happened with Jennifer. I told her everything. The theft, the confrontation, the lawsuit, the grocery store scene, Emma being used as a weapon. All of it spilled out in a rush of words I'd been holding back, because who was there to tell? "That woman is trash," Mrs. Patterson said bluntly. "And I don't usually speak ill of people, but she used your grief. She used your grandson's death. She used your love for Emma. That's not family, that's predatory. I keep wondering if I should have fought harder for Emma, if I should have gone to court for visitation rights, if I abandoned her by walking away." "You didn't abandon her. You protected yourself. There's a difference. And Emma is going to grow up and figure out what her mother is. Probably already has figured out some of it. Kids aren't stupid. When she's old enough, she'll reach out. And you'll be there, stable and healthy, instead of destroyed by her mother's manipulation." That became my mantra in the weeks that followed. I didn't abandon Emma. I protected myself. My sister would have approved. My sister would have insisted. I found a house. Small, 3-bedroom, in a quiet neighborhood, not unlike the one where I'd lived in the duplex. But this was mine. I could paint the walls. I could plant a garden. I could stay as long as I wanted. The mortgage was less than my old rent. The down payment came from the trust without making a dent in the principal. The day I closed on the house, I went back to the cemetery, sat by my sister's grave and told her everything. About Jennifer's lawsuit, about Emma, about the house I'd bought, about learning to be selfish like she'd wanted. "I'm doing it," I told her stone. "I'm protecting myself. I'm being smart. I'm not giving it away. I'm doing everything you asked me to do." And then, because she'd have wanted to know, I made the banana pudding, used your recipe, ate the whole thing myself over 3 days. It tasted like home, like you, like all those family gatherings we'll never have again. The crying came easier now. Not the desperate sobs of early grief, but the gentler tears of missing someone while also feeling grateful for them. She'd saved me, protected me, loved me enough to spend 12 years building this safety net. The least I could do was use it the way she'd intended. The house needed some work. The kitchen appliances were old. The bathroom fixtures were dated. But it was structurally sound, in a good school district, with neighbors who seemed friendly without being intrusive. I could grow into this place, could make it home, could finally stop moving, stop fleeing, stop barely surviving. My first night in the house, I set up my bedroom with the few pieces of furniture I'd bought. Nothing fancy. A bed frame from IKEA, a dresser from a thrift store, a nightstand where I placed my sister's letter and my old phone with her voicemail. The worn Bible that had traveled with me through the duplex and the nearly homeless period, and now here. I opened it that night, for the first time in months, and read the Psalms I'd had it bookmarked to. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul." Maybe faith was easier now that I wasn't desperate. Maybe prayer worked better when you weren't drowning. Or maybe my sister's love had been the answer to prayers I'd been too numb to articulate. Maybe being saved looked different than I'd expected. Maybe grace came through life insurance policies hidden in recipe books instead of through miracles from heaven. Either way, I was grateful. Grateful to be here, grateful to be stable, grateful to have had a sister who knew me well enough to save me even after she was gone. The antagonists in my story had faced their own reckonings. Jennifer's lawsuit failed. Her reputation in our old community was destroyed after people learned what she'd done. Mutual friends stopped returning her calls. Other family members distanced themselves. She'd isolated herself through her own choices, and I felt nothing about it. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just nothing. My sister had taught me that indifference was more powerful than anger. That the opposite of love wasn't hate, but apathy. Jennifer had no power over me anymore, no claim on my emotions, no ability to hurt me. She'd used up her ammunition and missed her target, and now there was nothing left between us except empty space. Be selfish, my sister's letter had said. Protect yourself. Value yourself. I was trying. Every day I was trying. And slowly, painfully, impossibly, it was working. Chapter 7. Honoring the Legacy. 6 months after moving into my house, I went back to work at a different medical billing office closer to my new neighborhood. I didn't need the job anymore. The trust provided more than enough to live on, but I needed the structure, needed the routine, needed to feel productive and useful instead of just waiting around in my comfortable house for the next crisis that never came. My co-workers knew nothing about the inheritance or Jennifer or any of it. I was just Margaret, the new billing specialist, quiet but competent, someone who did good work and didn't cause drama. That anonymity felt like freedom. But I couldn't stop thinking about my sister's work. The school cafeteria where she'd spent 23 years feeding children, some of whom had nothing else to eat. She'd been deliberate about portions, sneaking extra servings to kids she knew came from difficult homes. She'd used her own money sometimes, buying additional food when the school's budget ran short. She'd mothered hundreds of children over the years, children who probably never knew her name but remembered the kind lady who made sure they had enough to eat. I wanted to honor that, wanted to do something that would continue her work in a tangible way. But I was still learning how to be selfish, how to prioritize my own needs, how to protect myself from becoming the generous fool my sister had warned against. Mr. Morrison helped me think through it. Your sister's letter said you could help others once you were stable. Are you stable? I think so. I have the house. I have savings. I'm out of debt. I'm working. I'm not giving money to anyone who asks for it. I've learned to say no. Then maybe it's time to say yes to the right thing. Not out of guilt or obligation, not to prove you're generous, but because it genuinely matters to you and you can afford it. That conversation led me to the food bank where I'd once stood in line, ashamed and desperate, accepting canned goods from volunteers who'd tried not to pity me. Now I stood on the other side of that dynamic, volunteering 3 afternoons a week, sorting donations and packing boxes and helping people who looked like I'd looked 6 months ago. It wasn't enough. The food bank was understaffed and underfunded, operating out of a building that was too small for the demand. They turned people away sometimes when supplies ran low. They couldn't afford refrigeration for fresh food. They relied on whatever random donations came in rather than being able to provide consistent, nutritious options. I thought about my sister feeding school children, thought about her sneaking extra portions to the ones who needed it most, thought about what she'd do if she saw this situation. Then I thought about the trust. About $560,000 sitting in accounts because my sister had saved for 12 years. About her letter saying I could help others once I was stable. About the fact that I was stable now, that I didn't need all this money to maintain my modest life, that maybe the point of being saved was so I could save others. But I needed to be smart about it, needed to make sure I was helping without becoming a martyr. Needed boundaries and structure and the kind of protection my sister had tried to teach me. I talked to Mrs. Patterson about it. She'd become my friend, checking on me regularly, proud of how I'd rebuilt my life. You want to fund a food bank expansion? She asked. That's ambitious. Not funded entirely. but contribute significantly, enough to make a real difference, maybe 100,000, maybe more if it makes sense. I want to do it in my sister's name. I want people to know she cared about feeding hungry people, and this is continuing her work. What about keeping that money for yourself? For emergencies? For retirement? I'll still have plenty left. More than I need. I'm not giving away my security. I'm just using some of what she left to do, what she would have done if she'd had the resources. Mrs. Patterson smiled. I think your sister would approve, not of the money itself, but of you thinking it through, setting limits, making sure you're protected first. She wanted you to be smart, not cold. There's a difference. The food bank's director cried when I told her. $100,000? She repeated, like the number didn't make sense. Are you serious? Do you know what we could do with that? I have ideas, I said. I want this to be strategic. I want it to last. I don't want to just hand you money and walk away. I want to be involved. I want to help build something sustainable. We created a plan together. Half the money would go toward purchasing and renovating a larger building with proper refrigeration and storage. $25,000 would create an endowment for ongoing operational costs. The remaining $25,000 would go toward a nutrition program, partnering with local farms for fresh produce, creating meal kits that taught people how to cook healthy food on a budget, providing resources that went beyond just emergency food boxes. The renovation took 4 months. I was there for all of it, not because I had expertise in construction, but because I wanted to understand every dollar, every decision, every choice. I was learning to value money not just as security, but as tool, as resource, as means to accomplish things that mattered. We named it the Patricia Henderson Community Food Center. My sister's name on the sign outside. Her photo in the lobby, the one from her retirement party at the school, where she looked tired but proud, surrounded by colleagues and students. The plaque below it read, "In memory of Patricia Henderson, who spent her life feeding children and her death feeding her community." The grand opening was on what would have been her 57th birthday. Local news covered it. The mayor spoke. Former students who remembered her showed up to say she'd made a difference in their lives. People lined up around the block for the first day of operation, and we served every single one with dignity and fresh food and the kind of care my sister had shown in her school cafeteria. I stood in the lobby during the opening, watching people come through, watching volunteers distribute food with respect instead of pity, and I cried. Not from sadness, from the overwhelming relief of doing something right, something that honored her, something that would outlive both of us. Mrs. Patterson found me standing there. She'd be proud, she said simply. I hope so. I hope this is what she wanted, what she meant when she said I could help others once I was stable. This is exactly what she meant. You're not giving yourself away anymore. You're giving from abundance. There's a difference. The food center became my purpose. Not my only purpose. I still worked, still took care of my house, still built a life that was mine, but a core part of how I spent my time and energy. I joined the board, helped write grants, showed up for distribution days, learned the names of regular visitors, heard their stories, saw myself in some of them, the desperation I'd felt 6 months ago, the shame of needing help. One woman in particular reminded me of myself. Same age, similar circumstances, recently evicted and trying to figure out how to survive. I gave her my number, told her to call if she needed someone to talk to, not offering money, not trying to save her, just offering connection, because loneliness had been worse than hunger during my worst days. She called 3 weeks later. We met for coffee. She told me about her daughter-in-law who'd stolen from her, the familiar pattern, the same manipulation, the identical betrayal. I told her my story, all of it. Jennifer and the money and my sister's inheritance and learning to protect myself. "So it gets better?" she asked, her voice desperate for hope. "It can get better. If you're willing to be selfish. If you're willing to protect yourself. If you're willing to accept that some people will think you're cruel for setting boundaries and you do it anyway." How do I start? Stop giving them money. Block their calls. Accept that you can't save them. Focus on saving yourself. And if you need help with any of that, call me. I've been where you are. I know how hard it is. She became the first person I actively helped with my sister's money. Not by giving her cash, that would have repeated my mistakes, but by connecting her with resources, paying for a lawyer to help her navigate family court, covering the deposit on a studio apartment when she finally found one. Strategic help, bounded help, the kind that empowered instead of enabled. "Your sister was smart," she said after her situation stabilized, "hiding that money until you needed it, making sure you couldn't give it away. She protected you from yourself." She did, and now I'm trying to protect others without destroying myself in the process. It's harder than it sounds. But you're doing it. That matters. The food center expanded its services. We added a financial literacy program, a job training partnership, a clothing closet, a community garden where people could learn to grow their own food. Each addition was carefully planned, strategically funded, designed to create lasting change instead of just temporary relief. I thought about my sister constantly during this work, wondered what she'd think of each choice, wondered if she'd approve of how I was using her money, wondered if this was what she'd had in mind when she saved for 12 years to give me a safety net. One afternoon, a former student of hers came through the food center, a young man in his 20s who'd graduated from her elementary school a decade ago. He recognized her photo in the lobby. "Ms. Henderson," he said, his voice breaking. "She used to give me extra food. I was hungry all the time. My mom worked 3 jobs, and we still barely had enough. Ms. Henderson would pack me extra portions, tell me to take them home, tell me it was leftover and would go to waste anyway. She saved my life." I broke down right there in the lobby. "She was my sister," I told him. "This center is named for her. Everything we're doing here is because of her." He looked around at the renovated space, the full shelves, the volunteers treating people with dignity. "She'd love this," he said. "This is exactly what she was about. Feeding people, helping people, not making them feel ashamed for needing help." That conversation confirmed I was doing the right thing. Not because I needed validation, but because it connected me to my sister in a tangible way. She was still here, still feeding people, still making a difference, just doing it through me now. I established a scholarship fund in her name, $5,000 a year for a high school senior, planning to work in food service, nutrition, education, or social work. Someone who wanted to help people the way she had. The first recipient was a young woman whose mother had been on food stamps, who'd volunteered at our center, who wanted to become a social worker so she could help other families like hers. "Your sister would be so proud," people kept telling me. "This legacy you're building, this center, these programs, she'd be proud." I wasn't sure about that. My sister hadn't been the type to express pride. She'd been more likely to point out what could be improved, what needed work, what mistakes I was making. But I thought maybe she'd approve. Maybe she'd see that I'd finally learned what she was trying to teach me. Protect yourself first, then help others. Be strong first, then be generous. Build your own foundation before you start constructing buildings for other people. The trust still had over $400,000, more than enough for my lifetime, especially with my modest needs and steady income. I met with a financial planner to establish a structure for continued giving, annual donations to the food center, strategic support for other causes, resources set aside for emergencies. Not impulsive giving, not emotional giving. Strategic, bounded, thoughtful giving from a place of security. My sister had been right about everything. Right that I'd be too generous. Right that I'd need forced selfishness. Right that once I was stable I'd want to help others. Right that I needed structure to do it safely. I wished I could tell her. Wished I could show her the food center. Wished I could introduce her to the people we were helping. Wished I could thank her properly for the gift she'd given me. Not just the money, but the lesson about loving myself enough to protect myself. Instead, I visited her grave every month, brought flowers, updated her on the center's progress, read her letter again when I needed reminding about why all of this mattered, played her voicemail when I needed to hear her voice telling me she loved me. I'm doing it right, I told her stone during one visit. I'm helping people, but I'm not destroying myself to do it. I'm being smart, being strategic, being the person you tried to teach me to be. The autumn leaves were falling again, gold and red, the same season when I'd almost lost everything. A year had passed since I'd sat in that lawyer's office, learning about the trust. A year since I'd read her letter by her grave. A year since I'd understood that love could reach across death to save you. Thank you, I whispered to her stone. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for loving me enough to plan for this. I promise I won't waste it. I promise I'll make it count. The wind rustled the leaves. Somewhere, a bird sang. The afternoon sun was warm on my face, and I felt her presence more strongly than I had since the day she died. Felt her approval, felt her love, felt her protection continuing even now. Some bonds are too strong to break. Some love is too fierce to end. Some protection reaches across death itself and catches you right before you hit the ground. My sister had done that for me, and now I was doing it for others, one person at a time, one strategic gift at a time, one bounded act of generosity at a time. The legacy wasn't the money. The legacy was the lesson. Love yourself enough to protect yourself. Then use that security to protect others. Build your foundation first, then help others build theirs. That was what she'd taught me. That was what I was finally learning. And that was what I'd spend the rest of my life honoring, not just through the food center or the scholarship or the careful giving, but through the daily practice of valuing myself enough to stay strong so I could help others become strong too. Chapter 8. Unexpected Returns. 18 months after moving into my house, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, still cautious about Jennifer trying new tactics, but something made me pick up. Grandma? A voice I hadn't heard in over a year. Older now, more mature. Emma. My hand started shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Emma? Sweetheart? Is that you? Yeah, it's me. I'm calling from my friend's phone because Mom took mine away. A pause. I'm sorry I haven't called before. I wanted to, but Mom said you didn't want to talk to me. She said you were too busy with your new life, but I didn't believe her. Dad used to tell me you always kept your promises, and you promised you'd be there when I was ready. So I'm ready now, if you still want to talk to me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. Just held the phone and cried while my 11-year-old granddaughter waited on the other end. Grandma? Are you there? Are you okay? I'm here, I managed. I'm so okay. I've missed you so much. Every single day, every single moment. I've thought about you constantly. I sent you birthday cards. I wanted to see you, but your mother wouldn't let me. I know. I found some of the cards she hid. The ones with the savings bonds. She said they were junk mail, but I recognized your handwriting. Another pause. Grandma, is it true you have money now? Mom's been acting really weird about it. She keeps saying you're being selfish and keeping things from family. But her friend told her friend, who told her other friend, that you built a food bank or something? For Aunt Patricia? Aunt Patricia. Emma had called my sister Aunt Patricia, even though they'd barely known each other, my sister dying when Emma was only 5. But she remembered. She knew. I did build a food center, in your Aunt Patricia's name, because she spent her life feeding hungry kids, and I wanted to honor that. Would you like to see it sometime? Really? You'd let me come see it? Of course, if your mother allows it. I don't want to cause problems for you, sweetheart. I don't want to make your life harder. Mom doesn't have to know. I could tell her I'm going to my friend's house. I could meet you somewhere. Please, Grandma. I really want to see you. And I want to know the truth about what happened. Nobody will tell me the truth. They just say, you and Mom had a disagreement and you needed space. But it's been over a year. That's a lot of space. We made a plan, carefully, quietly. Emma would tell her mother she was going to a friend's house on Saturday afternoon. I'd pick her up 2 blocks away. We'd spend 3 hours together. I'd have her back before anyone got suspicious. It felt wrong, sneaking around like this, meeting my granddaughter in secret. But it also felt necessary. Emma deserved to know me, deserved to decide for herself whether she wanted a relationship with me, deserved the truth instead of her mother's manipulated version. Saturday came. I picked Emma up on the corner she'd specified, my heart pounding, terrified Jennifer would appear, terrified this whole thing would blow up. But Emma was alone, taller than I remembered, wearing clothes that were too small, her hair needing a trim, looking like a kid whose mother was too distracted by her own drama to pay attention to basic care. She hugged me hard when she got in the car. I missed you so much, Grandma. I missed you too, baby. More than you can imagine. We drove to the food center first. I showed her everything, the renovated space, the full shelves, the community garden outside, her Aunt Patricia's photo in the lobby. Emma studied the photo for a long time. I barely remember her, she said. Just pieces. She made really good pudding. And she had this way of looking at you that made you want to do better, you know? Like she believed you could be more than you were. That was her exactly. She was hard on people because she loved them, because she wanted them to be strong. Is that why she left you money? To make you strong? I'd prepared for this conversation, rehearsed different versions, trying to figure out how much truth an 11-year-old could handle. But standing there with Emma, looking at my sister's photo, I realized she deserved all of it. Your Aunt Patricia left me money because she knew I'd need it someday. She knew I was too generous with people who didn't deserve it. She knew I'd give away everything trying to help others and end up with nothing. So she saved for 12 years, built a safety net, and hid it where I wouldn't find it until I was desperate. She protected me even after she died. Is that what happened with Mom? You gave her money and she didn't deserve it. I gave your mom a lot of money over 6 years. I did it because I loved your dad, and I loved you, and I wanted to help. But your mom was using that money for other things. Things that had nothing to do with you or your education or your future. When I found out and tried to stop, she cut me off from seeing you. She used you as a weapon to try to force me to keep giving her money. Emma's face crumpled. So it's true. My friend said her mom said that your mom was stealing from you. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to think you two just had a fight and you'd make up. But it's true. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. I'm sorry your mom made choices that hurt both of us. Are you going to sue her? Take her to court? Make her pay it back? No, I'm not going to do any of that. Because it would hurt you. And I won't hurt you to punish her. She's your mother. You love her. I'm not going to destroy that relationship even though I could. Emma looked at me with eyes that were too old for 11, too knowing, too aware of adult complexities she shouldn't have to understand yet. Mom says you're rich now, that you're selfish for not sharing, but you built this whole food center. You're helping people. That doesn't sound selfish to me. Your Aunt Patricia taught me that protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. She taught me to be strong first, then generous, to make sure I'm secure before I help others. That's what I'm doing. I'm taking care of myself, and then I'm using what's left to help people who need it. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking. I told her about her dad, stories she'd never heard, memories of him as a child. I told her about my sister, about their relationship, about the harsh love that defined our family. I told her about the duplex and the eviction and the recipe book and the letter that saved my life. "Can I read it?" Emma asked. "Aunt Patricia's letter?" I'd brought it with me, somehow knowing I'd need it. I handed her the pages, watched her read my sister's aggressive handwriting, saw her face change as she understood the depth of what had been done for me. "She really loved you," Emma said when she finished. "Like, really, really loved you. This is the most intense thing I've ever read." She did. She loved me by protecting me, by forcing me to be selfish, by making sure I'd be okay even after she was gone. I wish I'd known her better. I wish I'd been older when she died. She would have loved you. She would have been hard on you, but she would have loved you fiercely. We got ice cream, drove around Charlotte, talked about school and friends and all the normal things I'd missed hearing about for over a year. Emma told me her mother was struggling, that money was tight, that the boyfriend had left and taken a lot of their stuff with him. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated. Most of me just felt sad that Emma was living with the consequences of her mother's choices. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Do you have what you need? Are you safe?" "I'm okay. Mom's been better lately, less angry. She got a job at a retail store. We moved to a smaller apartment. It's not as nice as our old house, but it's fine. We're managing." Managing. The word I'd used for years to describe barely surviving. I hated that Emma knew that word so young. When it was time to take her back, I drove slowly, wanting to stretch every minute. "I know this is complicated," I said. "I know your mom is your mom and you love her, and that's good. You should love her. But I want you to know that I'm here. I've always been here. And when you're old enough to make your own choices about who you have relationships with, I'll still be here. I'm not going anywhere. Can we do this again? Can I call you sometimes?" "Anytime. I'll answer every single time, I promise." I dropped her 2 blocks from her house, watched her walk away, fought the urge to follow and make sure she got inside safely. Trust, I reminded myself. Trust that she knows her own neighborhood. Trust that she can handle this. Emma started calling regularly after that, always from a friend's phone, always when her mother was at work or distracted. We'd talk for 20 minutes, sometimes longer, about everything and nothing. She told me about school projects. I told her about the food center. She asked questions about her dad. I answered as honestly as I could without traumatizing her with details about his death. 3 months after our first secret meeting, Emma called crying. "Mom found out I've been talking to you. She's really mad. She said I betrayed her. She said you're manipulating me. She said a lot of other things too, but I don't want to repeat them. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I never wanted to cause problems between you and your mom. It's not your fault. I chose to call you. I chose to see you. She doesn't get to control that. I'm 11 years old. I should get to decide if I want a relationship with my grandmother. Legally, your mother does get to control it, at least until you're older. I don't want you getting in trouble because of me. I don't care. She can't keep you away from me forever. Eventually, I'll be old enough that she can't stop me. And when that happens, I'm coming to live with you. I'm going to help you run the food center. I'm going to do what Aunt Patricia did, feeding people and helping people and not taking crap from anyone." I laughed through tears. "Your Aunt Patricia would have loved that plan and loved you for thinking of it. Mom says you think you're better than us now, that you have money and you're too good for your own family. Do you believe that? No. I think you protected yourself from someone who was hurting you. I think Mom is embarrassed and defensive, and she's taking it out on both of us. I think she made bad choices and she doesn't want to admit it, so she's making you the villain." 11 years old, and already understanding family dynamics better than most adults. My son would have been proud of her. My sister would have recognized herself in her. "You're wise beyond your years," I told her. "I learned from the best." Dad used to tell me that Aunt Patricia was the toughest person he'd ever met, but she was tough because she cared. He said you were the kindest person he'd ever met, but sometimes kindness needs boundaries. I think I'm trying to be both, tough and kind, with boundaries. That's perfect. That's exactly right. Jennifer forbade Emma from contacting me after that, took away her phone privileges, monitored her activities more closely. But Emma was resourceful. She'd call from school during lunch. She'd email from the library. She'd find ways to maintain connection despite her mother's attempts to sever it. I consulted a lawyer about grandparent visitation rights. Mr. Morrison connected me with a family law specialist who explained my options. I could petition the court for formal visitation, but it would be expensive, lengthy, and traumatic for Emma. The court would require evidence that denying access was harmful to the child, and Emma was clearly managing despite the restrictions. Unless there's abuse or neglect, courts are hesitant to override parental authority, the lawyer explained. Your best bet is probably what you're already doing, maintaining connection however you can, being patient, waiting until she's old enough to choose for herself. So that's what I did. I waited. I answered every call. I sent emails when I could. I kept birthday cards and savings bonds accumulating in case there was ever a way to give them to her. I lived my life and built the food center and honored my sister's memory and trusted that Emma and I would find our way back to each other properly when the time was right. Mrs. Patterson became my sounding board through all of this. "It's killing you," she observed one afternoon, "being separated from her again." It is. But Emma's right. Her mother can't control this forever. A few more years and Emma will be old enough to make her own choices. I can wait. I've already waited this long. Your sister would be proud of you for being patient, for not making it worse for Emma, for protecting yourself while also staying connected to her. I hope so. I hope she'd see that I learned the lesson, that I'm being smart about this, that I'm not sacrificing myself on the altar of generosity anymore. She'd see it. Trust me, she's probably looking down right now thinking, finally, the girl learned something. That image made me laugh. My sister, irritated that it took me so long, satisfied that I'd finally figured it out, proud in her own reluctant way that I'd become the person she'd tried to make me. The food center continued thriving. We served over 200 families a week. The nutrition program expanded. The job training partnership placed people in sustainable employment. The community garden produced enough vegetables to supplement our distributions and teach people about growing their own food. One afternoon, a woman came through who looked familiar. It took me a moment to place her. She'd been in line at the old food bank over a year ago, back when I was on the receiving end. Now here she was, working as a volunteer, distributing food to others who needed it. "You helped me," she said when she recognized me. "Last year, you gave me your number and told me to call if I needed someone to talk to. You helped me figure out how to protect myself from my daughter-in-law who was stealing from me." I remembered. She'd had the same story as mine, the same betrayal, the same need to learn boundaries. "How are you doing?" I asked. "I'm okay. I got my own place. I'm working part-time. I'm managing, and I wanted to give back, so I started volunteering here. Figured this place helped you, and you helped me, so maybe I can help someone else." That was the moment I understood what my sister had built. Not just a financial safety net for me, but a template for how love works. Protect yourself first, then protect others. Be strong first, then help others become strong. Build your foundation, then help others build theirs. The legacy wasn't just the money. It was the lesson replicated through each person who learned it and passed it on. It was the understanding that generosity without boundaries is self-destruction, but generosity from strength is transformation. My sister had known that, had lived it, had tried to teach it to me. And when teaching didn't work, she'd forced it through circumstances, through hidden insurance policies and carefully written letters and trust funds with specific conditions. She'd protected me. And now I was protecting others. And they were protecting others after them. The love multiplied, extended, transformed into something bigger than any of us. That was the real inheritance. Not $560,000, though that helped. Not the food center, though that mattered. But the lesson that love sometimes means forcing someone to value themselves, that protection sometimes looks like boundaries, that the greatest gift you can give someone is teaching them to be strong enough that they don't need you anymore. My sister had given me that, and now I was passing it forward, one careful act of bounded generosity at a time. Chapter 9. The Protector Lives On. 2 years after I'd sat in Mr. Morrison's office learning about the trust, I stood in the Patricia Henderson Community Food Center during our second anniversary celebration. The space was packed with volunteers, donors, families we served, and local officials who'd come to recognize what we'd built. The mayor was there, the news cameras had come. But what mattered most to me were the people, former clients who were now volunteers, families who'd stabilized enough to donate back, children who had full bellies and hope in their eyes. Emma was there too. 13 now, officially old enough in North Carolina to choose her own visitation arrangements. She'd called me on her 13th birthday and said simply, "I want to see you regularly." I told Mom. She's not happy about it, but she can't stop me anymore. Now she volunteered every Saturday, sorting food and talking to visitors and showing the kind of fierce compassion that reminded me of both her father and my sister. The autumn light streamed through the windows, golden and warm, exactly like it had been that day 2 years ago when I'd almost lost everything. The season had come full circle, but everything had changed. I thought about the soft pink bathrobe worn thin at the elbows that I'd finally thrown away, replacing it with actual clothes that fit and felt comfortable. I thought about the duplex with thin walls that I'd barely been able to afford, so different from the house I now owned outright. I thought about eating ramen for every meal versus the banana pudding I'd made last week using my grandmother's recipe, my sister's recipe, the one that tasted like home and love and protection. The mayor finished his speech and invited me to say a few words. I walked to the microphone, looking out at the crowd, at Emma standing near the front, at Mrs. Patterson, who'd driven me to that last Goodwill drop-off 2 years ago, at the woman I'd helped, who now helped others, at the young man who'd remembered my sister feeding him when he was hungry. 2 years ago, I began, my voice surprisingly steady. I was 3 weeks from homelessness. I'd lost my house, my savings, my hope. I'd given everything I had to someone who used my generosity as a weapon against me. I thought I'd reached the end of my story. I thought there was no way back from that kind of loss. The room was silent, attentive. Emma smiled encouragingly. But I was wrong, because my sister, who died 4 years before I hit bottom, had been planning for that moment. She'd been saving money for 12 years. She'd been building a safety net in secret. She'd been protecting me even when I didn't know I needed protection. And when I finally found the documents she'd hidden in a recipe book, when I finally understood what she'd done, everything changed. I pulled out her letter, the one I still carried, the pages worn now from being read and reread. She left me instructions. She told me to be selfish, to protect myself, to value myself enough to use the money she'd saved instead of giving it away. She told me that being generous without boundaries is self-destruction, but being generous from strength is transformation. And she was right. About everything. I looked at Emma. She was right that I'd give too much to the wrong person. She was right that I'd feel guilty about accepting help. She was right that I needed someone to force me to value myself. And she was right that once I was strong again, I'd want to help others. But this time, I'm helping from stability, from security, from the foundation she built for me. Mrs. Patterson was crying. Several other people were too. This food center exists because my sister saved for 12 years on a cafeteria manager's salary. It exists because she loved me enough to protect me even after death. It exists because she taught me that you can't help others if you've destroyed yourself first. She taught me that loving yourself enough to protect yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. And that lesson is what we're trying to share here. I gestured to the space around us. This isn't just about food. It's about dignity. It's about teaching people that they deserve help without shame, that needing assistance doesn't mean they're failures, that accepting support is the first step toward being strong enough to support others. My sister believed in feeding people, but she also believed in making people strong. This center tries to do both. The statistics my sister had researched came easily now. Financial exploitation of family members is epidemic. The states with the most victims are California with 11,622 cases, Florida with 8,138, and Texas with 7,035. But it happens everywhere, in every community. And it gets worse as people age. In nursing homes, almost 1 in 6 residents reports experiencing abuse. The people who should protect us sometimes hurt us instead. And when that happens, we need structures, resources, and communities that can help us rebuild. I folded the letter carefully. My sister understood that. She understood that sometimes love means forcing someone to protect themselves. That sometimes the greatest gift is a boundary. That sometimes being saved looks like a trust fund with specific conditions instead of a miraculous rescue. I looked directly at Emma, and she understood that the legacy doesn't end with one person being saved. It multiplies. Every person helped here can help someone else. Every family stabilized can stabilize another family. Every child fed becomes an adult who remembers and pays it forward. That's how love works when it's done right. It doesn't end. It transforms. It reaches forward through generations. The applause was warm and sustained. But what mattered was seeing Emma's face, seeing her understand what her Aunt Patricia had done, seeing her recognize the fierce protective love that had saved me and would now ripple outward through everyone this center touched. After the speeches ended, Emma and I stood in front of my sister's photo in the lobby. "Do you think she'd be happy with this?" Emma asked. "With what you did with her money?" "I think she'd point out everything I did wrong first. Then she'd grudgingly admit it's acceptable. That was her way." Emma laughed. "Dad used to say the same thing. He said Aunt Patricia was scary, but in a good way, like you always knew where you stood with her." "That's accurate. She was terrifying and wonderful, and I miss her every single day." "I wish I'd known her better, but I know her through you, through this place, through the stories. She's still here, kind of." She was right. My sister was still here, in the food center that bore her name, in the letter I still carried, in the lessons I'd finally learned, in the boundary setting I'd mastered, in the careful generosity that came from strength instead of desperation, in Emma's fierce compassion and wise boundaries and understanding that loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you. The protector lives on, not in person, not in the way I'd prefer, but in the legacy of protection she built, in the safety net she wove, in the transformation she enabled, in every person who learned from my story that being saved sometimes means accepting help you didn't know you needed from someone who loved you enough to plan for your worst moment. That evening, after the celebration ended, I drove to the cemetery. Emma came with me. We brought flowers, sunflowers, which were bright and aggressive and reminded me of my sister's personality. We sat by her grave as the autumn sun set, as the temperature dropped, as the season that had witnessed my near destruction 2 years ago now witnessed my reconstruction. "Thank you," I said to her stone, like I did every month. "Thank you for everything, for saving me, for teaching me, for loving me enough to force me to value myself, for building this foundation, for planning so carefully, for knowing me better than I knew myself. Emma leaned against me. Aunt Patricia, I'm going to be a social worker. I'm going to help people like Grandma. I'm going to teach people that protecting yourself isn't selfish. I'm going to make you proud. I put my arm around my granddaughter, my son's daughter, the child I'd almost lost access to, who now stood beside me, strong and wise and determined to carry forward the lesson my sister had taught through her death. The legacy wasn't the money. The legacy was the lesson. Protect yourself first, then protect others. Be strong first, then help others become strong. Value yourself enough to set boundaries, then teach others to do the same. Love fiercely enough to force those boundaries even when it seems harsh, because sometimes the greatest love looks like tough love, like forced selfishness, like protection that survives death. My sister had known that, had lived it, had saved for 12 years to give me one final gift wrapped in the message, value yourself. And now that gift was multiplying through Emma and Mrs. Patterson and the woman I'd helped, and the man who remembered being fed, and every person who came through the food center and learned that accepting help without shame was the first step toward being strong enough to help others. As we drove home that evening, Emma asked, "Do you still feel guilty about having money when other people don't?" "Sometimes," I admitted. But then I remember what Aunt Patricia said, that I can't help anyone if I've destroyed myself first, that protecting myself isn't selfish, that being stable lets me help others from strength instead of desperation. So I use the money wisely. I help strategically. I set boundaries. And I make sure I'm secure before I extend security to others. That makes sense. It's like they say on airplanes, put your own oxygen mask on first before helping others. Exactly. Your Aunt Patricia understood that. It took me almost being destroyed to learn it, but now I'm teaching it to others, hoping they can learn it faster than I did. Do you think Mom will ever understand it? I thought about Jennifer, still struggling, still making poor choices, still blaming others for the consequences of those choices. Maybe, eventually, people change when they're ready. All we can do is protect ourselves while leaving the door open if they finally decide to do their own work. That's generous of you, after everything she did. It's not generosity, it's just reality. Hating her wouldn't help anyone. Forgiving her doesn't mean forgetting or re-enabling. It just means not carrying the anger anymore. Your Aunt Patricia taught me that too. Indifference is more powerful than anger. We got home. I made dinner. Emma did homework at my kitchen table. Mrs. Patterson stopped by with a casserole because old habits die hard, and we all ate together like the family we'd become, not by blood or obligation, but by choice and shared understanding and mutual protection. This was what healing looked like. Not dramatic, not perfect, just steady, just normal, just the daily practice of being okay, being safe, being surrounded by people who chose to love carefully and well. Before bed, I reread my sister's letter one more time. The ending always hit hardest. Be strong, Maggie. Be smart. Be selfish for once in your life. And be okay. That's all I ever wanted. Just for you to be okay. I was okay. I was more than okay. I was strong. I was smart. I was learning to be selfish in the healthy way she'd meant. And I was teaching others to be okay too, passing forward the protection she'd given me, extending the love that reached across death to save me. The protector lives on, not just in memory, not just in the food center, but in every choice I make, every boundary I set, every careful act of generosity that comes from strength instead of desperation. She lives on in Emma's determination to help others without destroying herself. She lives on in the community we're building. She lives on in the lesson that's spreading person by person, story by story, transformation by transformation. Some love is so fierce it survives death. Some protection is so complete it continues working years after the protector is gone. Some lessons are so important they get passed forward through generations, each person teaching the next that valuing yourself isn't selfish, It's the foundation of being able to value anyone else. My sister knew that, lived it, saved for it, died believing it. And now I'm living it too, no longer the generous fool who gives everything away, but the wise woman who helps strategically, loves carefully, and protects herself and others with the kind of fierce devotion that would make my sister proud. That's the real inheritance. That's what she left me. That's what I'm passing forward. And if you're listening to this story from wherever you are, Charlotte or California or somewhere in between, if you've been that generous fool, if someone has used your love as a weapon, if you've given everything and ended up with nothing, I want you to know, protecting yourself isn't selfish. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. Valuing yourself enough to say no is not only okay, it's necessary. Learn it faster than I did. Teach it to those who come after. Build your foundation first, then help others build theirs. Be strong first, then extend that strength. Protect yourself well enough that you can protect others. That's what my sister taught me. That's what saved my life. And that's what I hope reaches forward to save yours. So where are you listening from? What's your story? Have you learned this lesson, or are you still learning it? Drop it in the comments. Share your experience. Connect with others who understand. Because that's how the legacy continues. Through shared stories, through mutual understanding, through community built on the foundation of protecting ourselves so we can protect each other. And if this story resonated with you, if it helped you understand something you needed to understand, if it gave you permission to protect yourself the way you've been needing to, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories like this. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, because my sister's protection didn't end with me. It ripples forward through everyone who hears this story and learns that fierce love sometimes means forcing someone to value themselves. That sometimes being saved looks like boundaries and trust funds and letters that explain hard truths. That sometimes the greatest gift is teaching someone to be strong enough that they don't need saving anymore. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, protect yourself first. The rest follows from there.